Recording in progress.
Our role as journalists will be examined. History will judge us.
From the time of dictator Ferdinand Marcos up to the present under President Rodrigo Duterte, investigative journalists have uncovered so many instances of injustice, fraud, government and business scandals, and illegal dealings. But it also involves a lot of risks, which not only at times jeopardizes the lives of the journalists, but even people close to them. The fact that journalists are prepared to go to such lengths in the public interest means that they are always accountable for their actions.
We deal with threats on the internet, disinformation, fake accounts, hate speech, bad algorithms, but on the ground, yung killings continue and cases are filed against journalists and human rights workers and development workers too.
Social media became the instrument of polarization, of dividing, of setting apart the different communities. And they talk only within their silos. And much of that is even silos of contempt.
We have to see it as a new medium. Kasi tama kayo, nandiyan yung platform. We can go into it, we can study the platform, study the formats, while still maintaining yung basic principles natin as journalists. Na magiging mas engaging tayo, sure, minsan pa-joke ng konti. But at the heart of it is a certain truth or a certain fact. Without giving up yung editorial prerogative natin, we should also use that as a way to listen to the audience. No?
Dapat tayo ang gumamit sa teknolohiya so that we do not become slaves of technology and social media. Kasi hindi natin iningatan at pinangalagaan yung audience natin. Nawala sila kasi naging kampante tayo. Naging kampante tayo kasi we thought that we are the end all and be all at tayo lang talaga pakikinggan ng audience.
Now I think is the time for us to really give more focus, more attention to the voters who are the audiences in those many so-called listening tours of the candidates.
We focus only on the personalities and quite a number do not even give a context to what these candidates represent, no? Hindi din binabanggit yung member ba ito ng mga dynasties? Kasi importante 'yon. Importante na malaman ng botante na in the last 3, 4 decades, 5 decades, ito lang yung ruling family in their respective areas.
Kung hindi man makademand yung ating mga consumers ng mataas na level na discussion sa mga nangyayari, meaning i-discuss yung bakit papalit-palit ng partido or substitute, siguro may choice tayong to ask the appropriate persons, authorities or experts kung bakit ganun at explain in a manner na nadadigest o na iintindihan ng ating mga consumers o ng ating mga audience.
Kailangan natin ng strong push sa candidates that they should be willing to be questioned talaga, and that will be the challenge for us because they will really attempt to bypass us so they can control their messaging.
It's not about us being first. It's about us getting the news right for the public because that's the reason we exist after all. Kasi di ba, bakit ka ba nakikipag-unahan? It's for you eh. It satisfies your ego. It satisfies your need to be a winner. But the real reason we do this is the public, the citizens, those who are going to benefit from any piece of news or information that you put out there. If that is what drives you as a journalist, then you won't go wrong.
Yeah. This can be the worst of times for journalists. We're being easily demonized. Lies and falsehoods spread faster than facts. And our profession is being devalued in the eyes of many. But the worst of times can also be the best of times. Because this is when we are most needed. This is when we must step up to perform our duty as fact gatherers and truth tellers.
It becomes incredibly important
that you do investigative journalism. In the world we live in today, it's a new age. And whether our democracy survives will depend on what you do.
Magandang umaga. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Looks like we're good. Magandang umaga. Good morning mga kapatid, kapamilya, kapuso, kasabwat, kaibigan, at higit sa lahat, mga katrabaho. Welcome to the culminating activity of our four-leg investigative journalism caravan that went all over the country and all over the world. Well, yun lang online. In November 2021, the PCIJ organized the second IJ conference, bringing journalists from all over the country. And the spin-off, of course, is a fellowship to pursue what our fellows would consider a very compelling story or issue. So from 80 participants, they were narrowed down to 4 fellows were chosen to pursue stories that were close to their hearts. And in the end result is what we now see at the PCIJ website and what we'll also be discussing today. So for those who have not yet read the stories, we do hope that you have read the stories, but in case you have not, go visit the website of PCIJ at pcij.org, especially after our discussion for today. So, well, like we said, it is an online caravan for students and faculties and university partners to highlight the importance of investigative journalism in an age of disinformation. We've had 4 legs, the first in Cagayan Valley, then Cordillera, then NCR, and then Calabarzon. We'd also like to thank our partners in this endeavor, the Department of Communication, Cebu Normal University, Visayas State University, Department of Development Communication, Xavier University, Ateneo de Cagayan, Department of Journalism and Communication, San Jose Recoletos, College of Mass Communication, Silliman University, Trinity University of Asia, Centro Escolar University, Department of Developmental Journalism, UP Los Banos, Biliran State University, Central Luzon State University, and the Silahis publication of the Mindanao State University. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. As well, thank you to Dr. Joseph Elvir Tubilan, Chair of the Department of Communication in Cebu Normal University, Professor Derek Alviola, my friend, Head of the Visayas State University Integrated Media Center, Ms. Rachel Antolinero Barquis, Chair of the Department of Development Communication in Xavier University in Cagayan, Dr. Madeline Baguio Quiamco, College of Mass Comm, Silliman University, Professor Jervis Manahan of Trinity of Asia, Professor Ricky Rosales, Communication and Media Program Head, CEU, Professor Aletela Araneta, Chair of the Department of Development Journalism, University of the Philippines, Los Banos, Dr. Madeline Baguio Quiamco, Dean of College of Mass Comm, Silliman, Dr. Victor Cañezo, President of Biliran Province State University, Professor Mark Andrew Gonzalez of Comm Department, Dr. Franco Teves, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs of MSU, Iligan Institute of Technology, and the partners of our previous pocket forums in Cagayan, Cordillera, NCR, and Calabarzon. Also, thank you to our funder for this project, the National Endowment for Democracy, hindi po yan CIA. Okay, that was a quick rundown. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you didn't fall asleep with that long introduction. Now I'll pass you on to our boss chief, Carmela Von Buena. Normally wouldn't need any more introduction, but for those who are not that familiar with Carmela, let's go into a quick introduction. Carmela is the executive director of the PCIJ. She's been heading the PCIJ since January 2021, but before that, she's had 2 decades of intense experience in journalism. She's been a reporter for Newsbreak, the investigative magazine, and then a senior reporter for Rappler until 2018. She's a contributor to the Guardian newspaper in the UK, and she's written or co-written at least 3 books on Philippine elections, and as well the Marawi Siege book, which has been shortlisted for the 2021 Witold Pilecki International Book Award. So I'll pass you on to Carmela Von Buena. Carmela.
Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Masaya po kaming makasama kayo sa final leg ng online caravan series ng Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, Investigative Journalism in the Era of Disinformation. Thank you, Sir Ed, Mr. Ed Lingao, for joining us again today. Thank you to the Thank you to the students and faculty who are joining us. Si Sir Ed, he doesn't need an introduction now. We all know him. We have so many university partners today. Marami din po tayong mga nag-sign up via our social media promotions. Magandang umaga po. Philippine Center for Journalism, or PCIJ, was founded in 1989 by Filipino journalists who saw the need to go beyond day-to-day reportage. Beyond the quick facts that we get from breaking news, we need a deeper understanding of the issues that affect the lives of Filipinos. The mission of PCIJ is two-pronged. One, produce investigative journalism, and two, train investigative journalists. Sabi nga ni Sir Ed, I joined PCIJ in January 2021, in the middle of the pandemic. But I suppose pwede ko ring sabihin na isa ako sa mga trainees ng PCIJ, no? I read the PCIJ magazine when I was a student. PCIJ editors also taught at the College of Mass Communication in UP Diliman when I was studying journalism there. Ang editor-in-chief ko po sa Newsbreak magazine, where I started out as a researcher, was Marites Vitug. She was also among the founders of PCIJ. So the practice of investigative journalism in the Philippines has grown in large part because of PCIJ. PCIJ practices what we call watchdog investigative journalism. We are watchdogs following the careers of public officials to see that they are serving their mandates to serve the people, to see that they are not instead serving their personal interest or the interest of their friends, big business, or others who may have funded their campaigns. So this year, PCIJ focused on campaign finance. During the 2022 campaign, you may have read our reports on the advertising spending of the candidates. We are thankful to our partner news organizations who continue to republish our reports, allowing wider audiences to access our investigations. Our coverage of campaign finance continues as COMELEC released the candidate sources, the statement of contributions and expenditures. Ito po yung dokumento detailing the disclosures of candidates kung sino yung nag-donate sa campaign nila at saan nila ginastos yung pera. Campaign finance is really an important coverage for PCIJ. Kailangan kasi nating malaman magkano ang ginagasta ng mga kandidato sa kampanya at kung sino yung nag-contribute sa kanila. Kasi kailangan nating bantayan, essentially, no, yung mga donors na ito, yung mga pangalan na to, na hindi sila maniningil kapag nasa pwesto na yung kandidatong sinuportahan nila. Today, we will talk about the work of PCIJ fellows who work with the PCIJ team to produce their own investigative reports. Watchdog journalism din po ang ginawa nila. The fellowship program is an offshoot of the successful Second National Investigative Journalism Conference, which PCIJ held last year with the support of the National Endowment for Democracy. Ito pong caravan series ay funded by the NED as well. When PCIJ was founded in 1989, hindi pa po uso yung terminology na disinformation, no? We called it black propaganda. Marami rin kasinungalingan definitely na umiikot, lalo na kapag eleksyon. Ang difference noon at ngayon ay yung internet. To be sure, maraming magandang naidulot yung internet, no? It has democratized access to information. It has enabled us to be closer to family and friends. Pero as we have discovered, marami ring mga umabuso sa internet. Pinabilis ng internet ang paglabanap ng disinformation, ng kasinungalingan. Dati ang political operators, when I was a younger journalist, sila yung mga minomonitor natin kapag eleksyon, no? May mga bulong brigade yan sa mga communities para magpakalat ng black propaganda at kasinungalingan. Ngayon, na-introduce na ang troll farms. Kung dati karamihan sa information natin nakukuha natin sa mainstream media, ngayon ay marami ng sources sa internet. Unfortunately, not all these sources are reliable. Siguro, I think what we would request for you to remove in your vocabulary is yung fake news. Hindi kasi maganda yung nangyari sa pagtawag sa traditional media na fake news. It has corroded public trust on the mainstream media. Sana hindi natin ito gamitin as an expression kasi the term empowers the critics of the media. Ang nangyayari kasi parang nagiging generalization siya, di ba, ng media. There's definitely sloppy journalism, there's sensational journalism, there's no fake news. And this campaign against the traditional media has served the interest of the unscrupulous officials who don't want the public to know about their secrets. They don't want people to believe in journalists who can expose them. Siguro ito yung malinaw, no? If politicians are committing wrongdoings, we won't know about these from their Facebook pages or the Facebook pages of their supporters. It's the investigative journalists who will expose them. It's the journalists who will take time to look into documents and interview people to get all the sides to a story. And this is why we're doing this caravan. We're looking for allies to defend and assert press freedom, freedom of information, and freedom of expression. Yung access to documents is getting harder and harder. Even the SALENS, yung Statement of Assets, Liabilities, and Net Worth, hirap na tayong makuha. The media is not perfect, and we know we need to do better to regain the trust we've lost as a result of the aggressive campaign against traditional media. And we believe investigative journalism is the best antidote to disinformation. So paano? Bakit investigative journalism? Investigative journalism looks at issues based on a combination of evidence, data, and interviews, diba? So in the era of disinformation, we need the evidence, data, and interviews to be incontrovertible, undeniable, irrefutable, so that trolls won't have the chance to peddle their lies. And this is what the PCIJ fellows were able to do in their reports. We will hear from them, and we will learn from their experiences. Hopefully, it will inspire you to practice investigative journalism as well. Thank you for joining us today. We invite you to listen and prepare your questions. Maganda yung Q&A discussions natin in the last 4 legs. I'm sure maganda ulit mamaya. And we will be joined by journalists such as, apart from Mr. Edling Gao, Christian Esguerra, and PCIJ Editorial Content Head Carol Ilagan. Magandang umaga po.
Okay, maraming salamat, Carmela. I'm sorry I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Ed. But anyway, ano lang ako, alipin lang ako sa gigilid dito. If you look at our original schedule for today, we were supposed to have Howie Severino to talk about disinformation and Christian Esguerra to talk about asking difficult questions. Unfortunately, si Howie will not be able to join us today because of an emergency. But we will still have Christian Esguerra. Yun lang, we will reshuffle a bit the schedule for today. We will begin this morning with our 4 fellows who produced stories that were published by the PCIJ. Again, like we said, spin-offs from the IJ conference, the second IJ conference that we had in 2021. So we'll begin with the 4 journalists. We are giving them more or less around 10 minutes each. Pero di naman hard and fast rule. More or less 10 minutes each to talk about their stories. And then we'll have Christian Esguerra come in to talk about asking difficult questions. And after that, usually the more interesting part is the Q&A. Let's not call it a Q&A. Pangit-pangit ng Q&A, parang napaka-formal eh. Usapang reporter. Tayo mag-usap anong nakuha natin sa mga story ito, anong mga suggestion natin, at anong pang magandang gawin. Let's talk about all these issues as fellow journalists, as colleagues, as comrades. So yun, let's start off with Mark Saludes, our first fellow for this morning. Mark Saludes is a writer, a visual storyteller with a focus on social justice, human rights, environment, indigenous peoples, peace, and conflict. He's a reporter for Likas, a Catholic news website. He's also a freelance cinematographer, a recipient of the 2020 Women, Peace, and Security Reporting Awards, one of the top 10 finalists of the 2020-2021 Journalism for an Equitable Asia Awards, also a recipient of the 2018 Gawad Agong sa Pamamahayag Awards and the 2016 Save the Children Most Outstanding Photograph People's Choice Awards. Mark, I hope I got that right kasi I got that from LinkedIn. So dinagdag ko na lang yan. He's of course an environmental activist. He has documented child labor in the mining industry. His story for the PCIJ, Apari fisher folk suffer poor catch with government dredging project at the mouth of the Apari River. So I'll leave it at that muna and toss the floor on to Mark. Mark, here you go.
Ayun, naririnig ba ako?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, yun. Salamat Manong Ed. Manong
Ed.
parang nininervyos ako pag ikaw yung nagpapakilala. Maliban sa hanggang ngayon starstruck pa rin ako sa iyo. Nininervyos talaga ako. Anyway, magandang umaga po sa lahat.
Good morning.
Ayan. At hindi ko na ikikwento kung ano yung findings ng story. Nasa PCIJ website na yon, pwede nyo nang mabasa. Magkwentuhan na lang tayo kung ano yung nangyari while doing the story, while doing the data gathering, etc. Pangalawa ko ng beses na to as fellow sa PCIJ. The first one was during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic. Last year yata. Yeah, last year. Ginawa ko naman yung tungkol sa attacks against church people. So, nagsimula ako mag-report ay hindi ko alam na yung ginagawa ko pala ay investigative journalism na. So, yun yung gusto kong maging challenge ngayon sa atin. No? Lalo na doon sa mga estudyante, lalo na doon sa mga susunod na generation ng journalists. Baka kasi hindi lang natin alam na yung ginagawa pala natin ngayon na paraan ng reporting ay investigative reporting na. Nalaman ko na lang yon nung nasabak na ako sa PCIJ at narinig ko na yung mga aral, 'di ba, na sinishare ng ating mga older journalists. So hindi madali, no. Hindi madaling maging journalist sa Pilipinas, lalo na while we are considered as one of the freest or isa sa pinaka free press sa Asia, parang ang hirap maniwala kapag nandun ka na sa ground at ginagawa mo ng trabaho. Nagsimula ang lahat etong storya ng impact ng government project sa Cagayan province ay sa simple kwentuhan lang eh. Pero dahil idol ko si Ed Linggao at si Christian Esguerra. So pag may mga kwentuhan, di ba? Tapos meron kang naririnig na what? Parang nagugulat ka, nagtatanong ka agad. Talaga, nangyayari ba yan? At doon nagsimula lahat. Nangyayari ba yan? Yung ganung tanong. Crucial sa atin ngayon yung pagtatanong eh. At hindi tayo dapat tumigil dun sa mga tanong na nangyayari ba yan? O sa konteksto ng martial law ay nangyari ba talaga yan? O sa konteksto ng nababasa natin online ay na mga information, ganun pa rin dapat, tinatanong pa rin natin, nangyari ba yan at nangyayari ba yan? So doon papasok yung obligasyon mo o yung responsibilidad mo bilang journal na maghanap ng sagot doon sa mga tanong. O doon sa simpleng tanong na nangyayari ba yan at nangyayari ba yan? Siyempre, manganganak ng mga tanong yon. Ang challenge, sasagutin ka ba ng mga tinatanong mo? So, doon papasok ngayon yung halaga ng komunidad sa ating trabaho, yung reporting, yung journalism. Kapag nasa likod mo yung community, kapag nakalubog ka dun sa community at kilala mo yung community at kilala ka ng community, yung mga tanong ay nasasagot mismo ng komunidad. Not necessarily masagot ito ng mga taong nasa estado poder, nasa gobyerno, o yung mga taong responsable. Hindi tayo tiyak kung sasagutin nila ng totoo at tama yung mga tanong natin. Pero ang mahalaga, nakukuha mo yung pakiramdam at buhay ng mas nakararaming tao. Doon, nagkakaroon ka ng validation. Mas nababalidate mo na hindi lang sabi-sabi o hindi lang chismis yung naririnig mong usap-usapan o yung nakikita mong nangyayari. Siguro, ngayong araw para sa akin, dahil meron pa akong hangover ng buong maghapon na coverage ng commemoration ng 50 years ng declaration ng martial law kahapon. At medyo masakit pa yung aking katawan dahil sa bigat ng bit-bit na equipment kahapon at yung bigat ng mga kwento ng mga martial law survivors. Ang ngayong araw ang tumatak sa akin ay yung halaga ng komunidad dun sa ating investigative reporting. Hindi magtatagumpay o hindi uusad yung investigative journalism sa Pilipinas without these communities. Unang-una yung komunidad na apektado ng mga issue. Pangalawa yung komunidad ng mga journalists na nagtutulong-tulong at nagkakapit-bisig para mabuo yung mga storya. Pangatlo, yung community ng democracy and freedom defenders. Kabilang kayo doon. Lalo na yung mga nasa rooms ngayon. Nakikita ko ngayon doon sa mga, may mga estudyante na nakaupo sa rooms. Kayo yon. So hanggat nandyan kayo, mabubuhay yung diwa ng investigative journalism sa Pilipinas. Mapaglilingkuran natin through investigative journalism yung mga komunidad na apektado ng iba't ibang issue. At siyempre, magkakaroon ng accountability. Yun lang. Parang speech yun hindi naman yun sharing experience. Hindi ko na kasi alam hindi ko na rin alam kung ano bang sasabihin ko ngayon kasi parang ang taas na nung agitation ko. Pagbukas ko pa lang ng laptop, nakita ko na si Edwin Gawe. So,
usually mas masaya ang discussion yung open forum Kasi doon tayo
mamaya.
Kapag-usap talaga So this is just I suppose yung 10 minutes is just a way for the fellows to break in, talk about themselves, talk about what they think and what they feel, and then let's have a full discussion later para makapagtsikahan tayo. Mas masarap yan pag may konting alak pero maaga pa masyado So, I'm sorry, may mga estudyante pala tayo. Okay, erase. Okay.
Yun lang. Back to you, sir.
Okay. Maraming salamat si Mark Saludes. Some pretty good points that we can go back to. Among them, of course, the importance of community. A lot of reporters kasi think na, as reporters, kailangan nating na makipag-usap lang sa mga opisyal. Hindi totoo yun. That's only part of the story, talking to officials and getting the official story. A big part of the job is talking to people, ordinary people, and what issues mean to them. As well, ang binanggitin ni Mark, but I think we'd like to go back to this later. In some misconceptions about investigative journalism, it's not a special show pa actually. Akala ng ibang tao kasi kailangan sobra kang talino o sobrang kang bright sa mathematics, hindi naman automatically ganun yun There are a lot of misconceptions about investigative journalism and what they are, what it is and what they do and how it's done. The other misconception of course is yung pag nang-aaway ka, investigative journalism na yun. Hindi ganun yun. Pag-usapan na namin yun. Mas mahabang usapan yan But all these things are, I think, important not only for our colleagues but as well for our fellow professors, for our guest professors, and for our students who are now watching. So forget what I said about alcohol. Okay. Now let's move on to our next fellow, our second fellow for today. At least for this morning, is Karlston Lapniten. He's a writer, photojournalist, and he works with Mongabay, Philippine Daily Inquirer, PCIJ, and local weekly regional newspapers. His special focus is on agriculture, indigenous peoples, and the environment. He's had a decade of journalism experience covering all aspects of community life in the Cordilleras. He's also done a story on, I saw this on Mongabay, story on the dying rice terraces and the need for sustainable livelihood as well. In a Philippine indigenous community, people have nawala yung aking there. Okay. In Philippine indigenous stronghold, traditions have been helping to keep COVID-19 at bay with the use of tengao. I hope I'm getting this right, tengao, which is a local version of a lockdown. He's also a member of an indigenous people. His story is the collusion and corruption that hounds the dam project in the Cordillera, particularly in Apayao, with at least 2 hydroelectric dams in the works. These are the Gened 1 and the Gened 2. So I'd like to pass you on to Karlston Lapniten. Karlston.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Sir Ed.
Good morning.
I hope I'm clear. Unfortunately, brown out dito sa Benguet. So please excuse me.
Yeah, it's good, Karlston. Medyo lakas naman ng konti para yung audio natin malinaw sa lahat. Kasi some of the people watching, group watching like yung mga students
Okay. So good morning once again. Like Mark, hindi ko na rin uulitin yung aking story. You can read it though on the PCIJ website. We are tasked actually to talk about the challenges and how to best tell stories daw on investigative journalism. Dagdagan ko lang siguro yung sinabi ni Sir Mark kanina. For me, the best way to tell a story is if you are invested in it, if you find something common dun sa story na sinusulat mo. And like for me, very important kasi yung story sa akin because these are indigenous people like me. And para sa akin, what affects other indigenous people would it also affects me. Ano lang yan meron kang there's a magical link between indigenous peoples, especially here sa Norte, and katatapos lang ng commemoration natin ng martial law, and yung background kasi ng story na ito is it is comparable doon sa attempt to dam the Chico River during the Marcos regime, and it was stopped by the people, by the indigenous people here in the Cordillera, and it is again happening on the same Marcos regime, and it's funny na it's the same concept. 4 na dams ulit ito, although sa ibang river. Pero it's the same. It's parang totoo ata yung history repeats itself. So I'm very hopeful that history would repeat itself and these dams would not push through. So very thankful tayo na nabigyan tayo ng opportunity ng PCIJ para ilabas yung story na ito. And it did in a way help because during that time na lumabas yung story ng PCIJ, yun yung time na nag-deliberate ang NBank ng NCIP tungkol dun sa motion for reconsideration na pinila ng community. And very fortunately, na-deny yung isang group of IPs na ginagamit para makipag-collude doon sa construction ng dam. So yun siguro ang pwede kong i-share as of now, and para sa mga estudyante siguro, if you're going to pursue the path of writing stories like this, one thing we have to remember is lagi tayong maging ready sa mga attacks, be it virtual or physical. Especially kung yung pinag-uusapan natin ay mga milyon-milyon, bilyon-bilyon, malaki talaga ang tendency na mahaharas ka, which happened sa akin, although hindi naman, it's not strange naman yung mga ganun. Pero yun lang, huwag kayong mabibigla, be ready, very cliche, be strong. Ayun siguro. Ano pa ba? Wala na akong maisip na I think, ma-share ko na lang siguro later kung sa open forum may tanong. Pero yun yung mga experience pagsulat ng story na ito. Of course, bukod sa ang hirap kumuha ng mga papel, lalo na sa mga agencies like SEC, syempre i-invoke nila yung privacy, wala kang legal standing para kumuha ng mga papel. Yun yung mga nagsistop sa pag-investigate. But there are ways around. Para-paraan lang yan para makakuha ng mga kailangan na data. So connection is important din. Pero yun, be very careful lang siguro sa connections kasi pwede kang ipahamak pwede kang ilaglag. Minsan, they will deny. Pero so long as concrete naman yung nakukuha mong data and they can stand on their own, I think pwede mo siyang gamitin. Important din na we consult mga lawyers natin, legal, kasi minsan baka yung ginagamit natin na data ay pwede tayong pwedeng ikapahamak ng mga editors natin. So ayun. Doon malaki ang tulong ng PCIJ sa pagbe-vet ng legal na data.
Oo, kasi kung sakaling mademanda ka, pati si Carmela madedemanda.
Oo, sir. Buti na lang po may
meron po tayong lawyer for libel check. Importante.
Yeah, there's always libel check with PCIJ.
Investigative.
Oo nga po. Thank you very much. Ano pa ba?
Okay lang, Karlston. Don't worry about it. We'll have a discussion later. So marami tayong pwedeng pag-usapan mamaya. Chill ka lang dyan. So okay na. Not unless you wanna add anything else.
Siguro lalabas na lang po kung sa open forum.
Okay, sige. Pag-usapan natin mamaya. Sabi nga ni Karlston, para-paraan lang yan. Actually, that's a big chunk of what reporters are supposed to be doing. Aside from the persistence and the patience, kailangan ka rin marunong gumawa ng paraan. Also as well, be ready for the challenge. Sabi nga ni Karlston na minsan-minsan may harassment yan, minsan may pananakot. Not always, pero sometimes that happens and you have to be prepared for that. As well, sabi rin ni Karlston, invest in the story. Invest in the story. We don't mean money. We mean time. We mean effort. We mean passion for the story. Kumbaga, you should feel it. You should fall in love with it, but do not let it be a fatal attraction. What I mean by that is you really put your mind and heart into the story, but do not get so obsessed na kahit even if you find data that contradicts your initial thesis, itutuloy mo pa rin. Hindi dapat ganon. Do not let it be a fatal attraction. Also have humility and know when you have to change or revise or amend your thesis. So yun. I think that's also important to tell an important reminder for all reporters as well for students and teachers na be in love with your story, but don't let it be a fatal attraction. Also have the humility to say na if it comes to that, baka kailangan mong baguhin yung ginagawa mo o i-amend o i-revise or i-review. So that among other things. Anyway, Karlston, like we said, let's get back to the discussion later. Let's bring in our next fellow for this morning, si Aileen Macalintal, Professor. Aileen Macalintal, Assistant Professor of the Department of Development Journalism in UP Los Banos. She also teaches data journalism. She's blue na kulay ng buhok.
Yes.
She's also a Balik Scholar. Sorry. She's a Balik Scholar. She studied business and financial journalism at the City University of London. She's a AA editor and financial journalist at MT Newswires. She studied investigative reporting at UC Berkeley. And I don't know if I'm reading this right. Aarhus University at Denmark. She's been writing for international media outlets for a decade. She's also facilitating journalism training, very important, for high school students. Her story that was published by the PCIJ, something that
recording stopped.
Something we can all relate to. Online loan sharks resort to
recording in progress,
privacy breaches and death threats. Aileen, Professor Aileen.
Yes, thank you, Boss Ed. Hello sa university students. Magandang umaga from Manila. And hello din sa mga fellow teachers around the country. And shout out to my students. So some of them here have also attended last week's seminar. Kaya siguro hindi ko na rin uulitin yung mga kinuwento ko last week, yung mga findings, saka yung mga experience siguro, yung mga na-miss ko na lang. Okay, so let me start with the idea for my story. So my story is about online loan apps. So OLA predators. So the idea for this story came many years ago when I was visiting Laguna. So I was in Laguna And I witnessed some loan sharks collecting juice, no, some money. Then I think it angered me so much, no. So when the loan sharks left, I was like, "Who was that? What was that about?" I was asking the store owner, and then the daughter of the store owner, a grandmother, the store owner was a grandmother, said, "Ate, isulat mo nga yan. Isulat mo nga yan, i-publish mo yung mga yan." So I said, right now, I don't think I have the time and the resources to do that. So, sige, naka-bookmark na siya. Bookmark in my mind. So eventually, so this year, we had the opportunity to write about this. So we have this PCIJ fellowship. And then side story, my father learned about the PCIJ fellowship and he was asking, so kukuha ka ba ng baril? So I was like,
so kumuha ka ba ng baril?
No.
Okay.
Although if you think about it, no, parang actually may mga finance stories and environment stories na really dangerous, and some journalists really try to protect themselves. Ayun, side story lang. But moving onwards to the experiences. So siguro if I were to put my experience into 3 parts, that would be hypotheses, heaps of documents and interviews, and then the writing, the human angle story. So hypotheses, it's a good first step in writing a story, any story, investigative story most especially, kasi this is your hunch. So you have guesses. So why is this happening? So this is a method in writing. And then you try to test it with available data. So in my particular story, my hunches were, could it be that there are more women borrowers, women victims of this online loan apps harassment? And I was also thinking, could it be possible that there's someone big time behind this? Maybe international, maybe Chinese companies. And then also I was thinking, could there be hundreds of these, maybe thousands of victims? So you will, if you read the story, you will see the answers to that, attempt to answer these questions. So after these hypotheses, so I listed these down. I included these in my pitch to Carol, Carmela, and then we talked about this with my editor, my assigned editor, si Prof. Ipe Salvosa of UST. So after that, ayan na. So gathering of the heaps of documents. So last week, I talked about my interview with the National Privacy Commission, or NP. And then a little bit about SEC. So I guess ang na-miss ko ay yung sa Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. I have to say na it was one of the most maybe let down. I'm thinking of the word annoying, but maybe it's not permitted. So sige, a bit of a letdown. No? Parang they kept on moving, for instance, to book appointments. So difficult to book an appointment with them. And then they kept on asking for a list of questions. So I was trying to explain to them very politely na, I'm so sorry. I don't think this is a good journalism practice to give your questions ahead. Kasi what might result from that is a PR-ish answer, no? Structured answers. So ayun. So try to, eventually, after a month, I think, or more than that, so I was able to schedule an interview. The same with SEC, so many people that you have to go through. So you have to, as mentioned earlier, it would be better to have a connection. So I tapped some connections, I asked people. So I need to talk to someone about this. Ayun. What else? So that's BSP, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Also, there was the other interviewees were okay, much better because these are experts. So, for example, Laban Consumer, and then the former president of Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Ayan. So those were some of the challenges and the experiences. Ayan. And also in general, maybe in the interviewing part, I think medyo challenging mag-book ng interview dito, no? Kasi unlike in my experiences in other places, so for example, I'm thinking right now of an experience in London. So I emailed someone, can I interview you, a business owner? I interview you about this subject, about Brexit? And then within 5 minutes, may reply agad. So that was like the fastest ever reply to an interview request. So yeah, but in the Philippines, it's really challenging. As challenging as getting documents from SEC, which you have to pay, by the way, as I mentioned last week. Yeah, so these are some of the challenges.
Pero baka naman yung sa London na, Aileen, baka naman yung sa London na 5-minute reply mo, no kagad, kaya ang bilis.
No. Sorry, I forgot. The reply was yes. Sure.
Aba, okay, sige. Baka lang sakali.
Yeah. So after getting all this information in the writing of the story, as mentioned again earlier, it's difficult now if you're having a lot of data. We don't want our readers to just skip the numbers. So we want to put a story right from the start. So inuna ko yung story ni Mina, yung napukaw yung attention ko kasi yung utang niya umabot ng 100,000. Tapos nabayaran na niya pero hinaharas pa siya. So ayan, so you start with stories. So maybe if I were to wrap up these very teacher, so for you to remember, tatlong H, hypotheses, a heap of records or documents or data, and then the human angle, the human story. So H. And then finally, just maybe a final statement. I think stories such as this, stories such as those of Marx and yung story ni Carl, story ni Paul, I think these are really important right now because leaders are deflecting attention from the suffering and the despair of certain segments of society. And they're deflecting attention by highlighting so-called development achievements such as mega infrastructure projects or the ringing of New York Stock Exchange bell. Maraming salamat.
May sundot ka dun.
Yeah.
Okay. So may panibago tayong maliban sa 5Ws and 1H, meron si Aileen na dagdag na the 3 Hs. Hypothesis, heap, and human angle. Actually, dapat 4 yan eh. Hypothesis, heap, at dahil sa laki ng heap, himatay.
Yeah.
Tapos ang human angle.
Yeah.
But that's a good way to remember it. Hypothesis is important because sa huli, doon umiikot ang story mo eh. Doon umiikot ang mga tanong mo. Doon umiikot ang paghahalukay mo. Ano ba gusto kong patunayan? Ano ba gusto kong sabihin? Diba? You keep on having to go back to that eh. If only to remind yourself what exactly was the angle that you had in mind. Para hindi ka maligaw ba? Diba? Para meron kang focus, so you have to keep your hypothesis in mind all the time. Also, yung heap refers to, I suppose, it's a discipline of gathering data and information, whether these are numbers or interviews or opinions or insights. Hindi pwedeng investigative journalism hindi pwedeng investigative report na basta galing lang sa ere o galing lang sa papawid yung mga yung mga conclusions mo. It has to be based on facts. And that is what a heap is about. And also that's also what causes the other H, which is himatay. And the human angle. Basically, it's you may have the best story in the world, but if you don't know how to humanize it and make it tangible and make it relatable to your viewer or reader, para ka nagkikwento lang sa sarili mo at sa nanay mo. So you have to make it a compelling story. Like it or not, you have to make it readable or watchable and interesting to the people who should matter. And make it matter to people who matter. Diba? So the 3 H's courtesy of Aileen. Maraming salamat, Aileen Macalintal, coming to us from UP Los Banos. And our fourth fellow, si Paul Jeffrey Penaflor, is an English, science, and journalism teacher. He's also the school public advisor at St. Edward School in Cavite. He's now taking up a Master of Arts in Comparative Literature at UP Diliman. His story, Calax Project Hastens the Death of Farming in Imus, talking about the loss of agricultural land and displacement as a result of that new expressway. As well, the issue of land conversion versus agriculture and what land is supposed to be used for. Paul Jeffrey Penaflor, sir, please take the floor.
Thank you so much po, Sir Ed. Thank you so much, PCIJ. Good morning, everyone. Allow me to share with you my report, some challenges, and how I understood investigative journalism during the whole process. I came up with a two-part report. The first part looks into how the 35 billion peso Cavite Laguna Expressway project displaces farmers in Imus, and the second is about the politics of land conversion in the city and how industrialization, urbanization kill the livelihood of the farmers. Recurring po sa lahat ng interviews that I've done, sinasabi ng interviewers na wala nang magagawa, parang puro ganun, wala nang magagawa dyan. So parang nung una, parang feeling ko wala naman yatang issue kasi wala nang magagawa eh. 'Di ba? Parang the farmers have accepted their fate of losing their farms to urban developers, and karamihan sa mga magsasaka sabihin nila, bilhin nyo na, basta bayaran nyo lang kami ng tama. And in the agriculture offices, it's the same. They tell you, wala na kaming magagawa dyan. So I think investigation begins with the idea na baka wala naman kasing ginagawa. Kaya these offices continue to allow conversion of many farms. For example, nag-interview ako sa agrarian reform, and they said they are there to distribute farms to the landless farmers. Pero actually sila yung tinuturo ng agriculture for approving land conversion applications. And ayan, siguro when I visited these offices, none of them could really determine whose accountability it is. Nagtuturoan. So ayun, if I illustrate some government offices I've visited and interviewed for the research. And horizontal and vertical yung turuan. Vertical in a way na one office at the city level would say, tanungin nyo na lang doon sa provincial, and then when I go to the provincial, may kasalanan yan central office. So wala nakakasagot, nagpapalitan lang. Or horizontal in a way na yung agriculture office, ituturo doon sa kabilang office, then pagpunta ko sa kabilang office, doon sa kabilang office. So yung ganon. Pero at saka ang hirap kasi bawat office may kanya-kanya silang protocol when accepting people for interviews. May mga welcoming and marami namang nagre-reject, just like what Miss I has told earlier, no? Meron manghingi ng formal letter, ganyan. Mahirap yung proseso. Pero meron din naman, they'd welcome you, lalo na kapag nga may kakilala ka. So, ayan, I think you have to be patient din when you go to the offices. And then, what else? Interviewers provide either ang problem too little or too much information. Kasi may mga offices na madamot sa information. Ayun nga, ituturo ka sa ibang offices because they don't want to disclose information that could, negatively affect their image. And there were interviewers naman who would give so much information. Most of it are unnecessary or are irrelevant to the issue. I tend to be wordy when I was doing the draft. I want to put all the information gathered in the article to avoid, alam niyo na, takot ako kasi this is my first time to be a journalist talaga. And but gladly my editor generously did the pruning and revising. And yeah, going back to the irrelevant information, no, most officers would give you how magkukwento how their day in the office looks like, their functions, and from my observation, they concluded with their limitations. They'd say na, ito lang yung trabaho ko, ito lang yung pwede kong ibigay sa'yo. In the end, you'll realize na when you have all the data, ang haba ng interview, pero konti lang dun yung talagang magagamit mo for the issue. But then what helped me to get the needed information was when I asked if they have a research office. Lahat naman sa mga government office, usually meron silang research office and parang pinagyayabang nila yon. So let's go there, and if there have publications, so they would share it with you. Nandun lahat ng documents. Most government offices are required to do archiving, and in my experience, they were willing to share them. But it also gave me the chance to ask more questions. So I allowed them to interpret the data, the reports, and most of the time, you'd observe discrepancies in terms of how a particular information is written compared with how an officer narrates that. So you have to go behind or beyond the paper. And it gave me the opportunity to interrogate what's written in the reports. For example, yung sa environmental impact assessment ng DPWH, nakalagay doon the cost of displacing families and loss of agri-lands is to be determined. So parang bakit wala pang presyo? But in reality, when I interviewed the farmers, meron na, and nakikipag-bargain sila sa ganitong halaga, and they were not satisfied of the price. Ayan, the price is not right. And considering na maghahati-hati pa sila dun sa bayad, yung mga magkakapamilya, and the landowner versus the tenants. So I think disinformation happens also between and within government offices, and we have expectations kasi from the government, and these expectations are set through government orders, their functions. Makikita natin sa mga moratorium, even press releases, I say. And it's our role as investigative journalists to interrogate these materials, bring them on the ground, compare them with the live reality of the people. Kaya dun sa article, mas may weight yung interviews sa ating mga magsasaka kasi sila naman talaga yung binibigyan natin ng voice. Just to wrap up everything, I understood investigative journalism as a tool that exposes inequality and abuse, and it should amplify the voice of the community, the masses, and the poor. So that would be all, Sir Ed.
Okay. Si Paul Jeffrey Penaflor, I think it's notable to point out yung sinabi mo kanina na there was a point when you were wondering kung may story pa ba rito. Kasi parang sabi ng mga tao, wala na magagawa. Parang resigned na sila doon sa mangyayari o doon sa parang inevitable. So parang wala na sigurong issue. And you also said, investigation begins with the idea na meron pa bang magagawa. I suppose you can extrapolate that further. Investigation begins with the idea or with the question na meron ba dapat ginagawa? Diba? It's not whether or not it's inevitable, it's whether or not something should have been done or should be done or can still be done, past, present, and future. So it's about people and their lives and what has happened and what will happen to them. It's about spurring people into action and officials into action. So I think that's something notable na sinabi ni Paul Jeffrey Penaflor. Also, napakita mo kanina, parang minsan nakaka-overwhelm yung mga detalye tsaka yung mga facts. And that happens to all of us. Sometimes it comes to a point na parang, ayoko na, magtatago na lang ako sa ilalim ng kumot. And that's natural. A big chunk of the work is figuring out kung anong itatago, anong itatapon, anong iuuna, anong ihuhuli. So don't worry, lahat tayo ganyan. Lahat tayo ng problema sa ganyan. And that's I suppose that's part of the learning experience. Hanggang ngayon ganun pa rin kami. Problemado sa ganyang mga issue. Hey, maraming salamat, Paul Jeffrey Penaflor. We'll have our fellows come back after a while for the discussion. In the meantime, we now bring in Christian Esguerra. Ano ba si Christian? He's here na, no? Okay, Christian's already here. Christian Esguerra is going to talk to us about conducting difficult interviews. Nako. Yeah, well, bagay na bagay Christian to. Christian, of course, is a well-known political journalist. He's a very, very well-known talk show host and educator. He hosts Facts First, a political talk show that's streamed live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. He is known for his very, very insightful and no-holds-barred kind of questioning. He's also very much into fighting disinformation. He began his career as a reporter of the Philippine Daily Inquirer in the year 2000, shifting to ABS-CBN as an anchor reporter in 2015. He now teaches political reporting and journalism ethics at the UST. He is the Marshall McLuhan Fellowship Awardee in 2020 and also received the 2019 Award for Distinction or Award of Distinction from the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility. He's also the Titus Brandsma Awardee for Emergent Leadership in Journalism. And more than anything else, he's also the proud father. He's also a proud father and a proud family man. Good morning, Christian. At take it away.
Ayun, good morning, Sir Ed. Maraming salamat ha. Alam nyo, idol natin lahat si Sir Ed Linggao. Actually, itong talk na to, pwede siya lahat gumawa nito sa totoo lang eh. Kasi pag tinignan yung career path niya, marami tayong similarity, no? Started sa print, no? Pero yan, syempre, much more accomplished and much older, quote-unquote, si Sir Ed Linggao.
Password.
Hindi, lang, para ilaglag pa kita ng konti, no? Yung kanina, pinapakinggan ko yung Fatal Attraction reference, no? I hope you were not referring to the 1987 movie, no? Michael Douglas. Ha?
87 pa pala yun?
So, tama, movie yun. No? Napanood ko yun ilang beses eh. Fatal Attraction. Okay.
Huwag mo na magitin, baka i-research sa mga bata eh.
Oo, wag. Not for, not for general public consumption. O sige, I'll share my screen. Maganda yung tone na sinet ni Sir Ed Linggao kanina, no? Parang let's make this more of a conversation. Dapat naman ganun, no? Parang discussion or parang kwentuhan among journalists.
Parang inuman.
Oo. Masyado na maaga, no? Eto, sige. Ang inassign sa akin topic kasi conducting difficult interviews, pero naisip ko kasi ano ba magiging useful sa inyo. Kasi hindi naman tayo lahat magiging talk show host, di ba? So, ang gusto ko kasing rito, parang idea, why are we conducting interviews in the first place? So, ang pinaka maganda sigurong base ng parang starting point natin, we have to be conscious of the fact na we're doing interviews for a story. Ayan. So mag-i-interview tayo dahil meron tayong binubuong storya. Hindi yung wala lang, di ba? Mag-i-interview lang tayo dahil we want to be someone like Boy Abunda or someone like Tony Gonzaga. Tapos nun, we let others to do the story or to storify the interview. Hindi po nakakatalino yun, no? Hindi nakakadagdag sa kaalaman yun. So, ang predisposition dapat natin, pag journalist tayo, we conduct the interview and we do the story. In large part because of that interview, but the interview should not be the only basis of the interview or the story. Ayan. So eto, linawin muna natin siguro right from the start. Ano ba yung goal natin sa pagko-conduct na interview? Of course, you need to get information. So dito in the context of investigative reporting, I think it's impossible to do an investigative report without conducting an interview because you have many different sources of information, in large part documentary, yung documents. Pero kailangan natin makipag-usap sa mga tao to help us make more sense about the documents. Kasi not all documents speak for themselves. A lot of documents need a lot of interpretation and expert opinion or explanation. So kailangan natin mag-conduct na interview. And of course, we need to talk with those who were involved in the story, in particular a controversy. Tapos, hindi pwedeng kakausapin natin sila, parang perfunctory lang na nakausap ka na namin, tapos eto na yung side nyo. No? Hindi pwedeng ganon. So, we have to clarify the goal of our interview. Number one is to get information. Tapos, let's say, depending on the story that you're writing about, you have to make the interview tell the truth. Or, if not, catch whether the interview is lying. And there are certain techniques, there are certain situations where you can actually catch whether the person is not telling the truth. So again, yung sinasabi ko kanina, we're conducting an interview all for a new story. So maganda yung ano nyo, yung base niya ginagawa nyo ngayon dahil nagsusulat muna kayo, no? Magandang training yun eh. Conducting interviews for articles. So hindi nyo iniisip kung ano itsura nyo sa interview, kung ano yung sasabihin kung may nanonood, no? So you're just doing it for the plain and simple reason that you want to get a story out of that interview. And of course, in the end, you want to inform, enlighten, or educate the public. You want to prompt them to take positive action about something. Kasi yung ginagawa natin, whether we like it or not, may saysay, no? Even if the story cannot actually change the world, it can move certain policies toward the right direction. For example, isa sa mga favorite topics natin, di ba, yung mga political dynasties, bakit natin in-expose yung palaki na political dynasties sa ating Congress. Alam naman natin hindi mababago yan agad, no? So it would take perhaps another generation for them to even, let's say, come up with an enabling law doon sa constitutional ban on political dynasties. Pero alam natin na in the process namumulat yung mga tao sa political reforms. So may ano yan, meron siyang epekto even if the effect is not as grand as we would want it to be. So meron laging goal yung interview, which is of course part of a larger story. So ito, mga basic things. No? We have to understand the setting of the interview kasi kanya-kanyang challenges yan. For example, pag sit-down interview, may appointment, presumably we have more time to prepare and to actually conduct the interview. So usually kinakausap yung secretary, sineset yung interview, and then that's fine. So nandun naman yung ambush interview, which is fast-paced, madalian. So no beating around the bush, no BS. Just ask your question. Wag na magpatumpit-tumpit, no? Wag na magpa-cute sa camera, lalo pag feeling nyo naka-stream or naka-live telecast yung interview, wag na mag-modulate ng boses. Modulate. Wala nang ganito yung, wala nang ganon. Go straight to the question. You don't even have to introduce yourself, lalo pag ambush interview. Kasi pag naka-huddle naman kayo as reporters, may ID naman, presumably reporter ka ron eh. So unless tanungin kayo, although it happened to be before, yung ganyan, no? Ambush interview, minsan may mga suplado ng mga official na susukatin ka muna eh. So bago sila sumagot, titingnan ka muna ng isang meaningful stare, tapos tatanungin, saan ka ba, iho? Diba? May mga ganun eh. So may mga nang didiscriminate na ng mga sources. And some of them can be considered as difficult. Itong setting naman na isa, press conference, wherein reporters are gathered. So ngayon, hindi lang reporters, no, pati mga vloggers, tsaka mga pseudo-reporters, yung mga house show, lahat yan nag-gather yan in one venue for a press conference. Dito sa press conference, meron siyang advantages tsaka disadvantages. Ano yung advantage nito? Hindi nyo na kailangang hatakin yung interviewee to talk with you or with the press kasi sila nag-set eh. So arrange na yan. Ang tanong, sasagutin ba na maayos yung mga tanong nyo? And number two, if you are very competitive, you'll be in the company of competitors eh. So ang ginagawa ng iba dyan, ang tinuturo usually, save your best questions to yourself. So ginagawa ng iba, nag-i-interview at the end of the press conference. That's fine, pero may risk yun. No? Paano kung nagmamadali yung kausap nyo? Baka naman hindi rin ganun kaganda yung tanong nyo. Akala nyo lang ganun kaganda. So sinave nyo sa dulo. Bigla umalis, sumakay sa kotse. Di nawalan kayo ng opportunity. So you have to gauge the situation. Ako, if you ask me, lahat naman ng reporters kasi competitive eh. Yan si Carmela, I know she's very competitive yan. So, pero sa age ngayon, no, I think while the competition naturally exists, I think journalists should work together even more. Instead of focusing on yung mga flimsy competition, yung feeling mo. Yung tanong ko, sobrang ganda, no? Hindi ko itatanong to kasi mananakaw na yung angulo ko. Diba? May mga ganun kasi mga reporters na ganun mag-isip. So, sa press conference, you have to minsan nag-uusap-usap din yung mga reporters yan eh. Yung sasabihin, baka naman yung tinatanong mo na sagot na at tama naman yung sagot, di ba? So minsan, pag mga colleagues naman kayo, maayos naman kayo yung makitungo sa isa't isa. So tatanungin nyo lang, medyo tight yung schedule natin for this interview. Pwede ba ikaw magbuhos ng ganitong tanong, ipa-follow up ko. So sometimes, wag din naman kayo mahiya na ulitin yung tanong na tinanong na, lalo po yung sagot na hindi pa naman nakukuha, hindi pa lumalabas. So don't be afraid of that. Sometimes din, may mga ma-encounter kayo mga supladong colleagues nyo, no? Minsan makakadinig kayo ng mga side comments. Ano ba yan? Natanong na. Bakit tinatanong pa uli? Minsan may mga salbahe, sabihin, that's a stupid question. Well, I don't know whether that's still happening now, no? Medyo hindi na ako nag-field lately. Pero these things are happening. So don't let those challenges bother you. Remember, ano lang yan, mga peripheral variables yan eh. Ang focus nyo pa rin yung story at saka yung subject matter. Mahirap, let's say, press conference pero group yung nagpe-press conference. So you have to be aware of who says what. Lalo pag nandun yung recorder nyo. So ingatan nyo na wrongly ma-attribute nyo yung sinabi doon sa ibang nandoon sa press conference. And you have to be very, very precise. You have to be very, very accurate with your attribution. Attribution yun yung who says what. No? So alam na mga lahat ng journal students yan. So ito naman yung isang setting, televised or streamed. So presumably, kunwari talk show. Ayan. So may mga challenges siya. Pero dito kasi I don't want you guys to actually look for models based on television interviews or streamed interviews. Kasi meron siya sariling dynamics eh. Unang-una may audience, no? So yung ibang mga journalists may or I won't call them journalists, no? I would call them media celebrities, which is a pejorative, no? So it's actually an insult doon sa iba. Kasi you have to distinguish between a journalist conducting an interview in any platform, including television, or your so-called media celebrities conducting interviews before a live audience on television. Dun papasok yung kaninang hinirit ko, no? Yung nagmamodulate ng boses, kumukunot ng noo, nagbe-brief pause before a certain question. Kasi ang tendency nun, they conduct the interview not just for the audience not exactly for the audience to benefit them, but for them to look good before the audience. So wag niyo susundin yung mga ganung models, okay? And then hindi rin maganda pag yung interview scripted. So for example, yung interview sa TV, bago pumayag yung isang source na umupo in front of you before the camera, ano ba itatanong mo muna? So ginagawa ng iba, pumapayag, no? Kasi ayaw nila magkaroon ng quote-unquote dead air. Unang-una, hindi naman to show, no? Actually, mali nga yung term na ginamit ko dito, talk show eh. It's not supposed to be a show. It's supposed to be a program. So, pag ginawa kasi natin show yan, para ba siyang stage play? Bawal magkamali, bawal mag-stammer, bawal mabulol, bawal magkamali ng tanong, bawal magalit yung kausap nyo dahil hindi nagustuhan yung tanong. It's not supposed to be a show. It's supposed to be an honest-to-goodness discussion between you and the source. And it just so happened that the format provides a live audience na nanonood. So dapat yung goal natin maliwanag pa rin. Ginagawa ba natin to dahil gusto nating makuha yung punot dulo ng issue? And then ganun din, yung kunwari, I suppose, so sina Ed Lingo, di ba, pa nag-interview ka sa TV, yung the print reporter in you, tumatakbo lagi, no? Ano ba yung angle ang makukuha ko rito? Di ba? Tapos naturally, naglalagay ka na ng list of stories based on that interview. And sometimes baka na-frustrate ka rin, no? Gusto mo ikaw na gumawa ng card gen. Kasi minsan hindi nakakasunod yung yung nasa booth. Hindi na isusulat agad yung, teka, ito yung angulo eh. Di ba minsan nangyayari yun? Kasi yung interviews, di ba, yung interviews niyo sa TV5, yan eh, ini-storify din yan sa online, di ba?
Yeah.
So sometimes,
sa Philippine Star, sa B-World.
Oo. Di ba masakalap dyan pag sa sarili mong news org, naskupan ka pa ng kalaban. Sa sarili mong interview. Nangyayari yun. Tapos ito naman, yung online interview na sinasabi ko, this presents a new challenge, especially as we have seen during the pandemic. Yung mga sources hindi natin mahatak to sit in front of us or for us to go to them. So kunwari magsaset tayo, pwede po ba kayo ma-interview? Tapos sasabihin, sige, Zoom na lang tayo or StreamYard, whatever online platform that is available. Pwedeng Viber. Dito kasi may mga challenges yan eh. Parang noong unang panahon, no? So hindi ko alam kung nagko-conduct pa kayo ng phone interview ngayon. Pero I remember there was a time before na, I remember there was a veteran journalist nagkamali ng nakausap eh. Akala niya yung kausap niya sa telepono, yung isang public official. It turned out hindi pala yun. So, ang kinote niya yung public official na akala niya nakausap niya sa telepono. So, yun yung lumabas sa dyaryo. So, nangyayari yun, di ba? So, pag hindi niyo nakikita yung kausap niyo, you have to make sure that you know who these people are. Nabobosesan niyo, kikilatisin niyo na siya talaga. Kasi pwedeng yung house help nila o yung driver niya, pwedeng magpanggap na siya yun, di ba? O kaya assistant niya eh. Pero dito sa online interview, nakikita natin yung kausap natin. Pero ang challenge dito, gaano ka-truthful or ka-fluid yung discussion pag magkaharap kayo. Kasi dito, papasok na rin yung ilang elements ng televised or streamed interview. Miski kayo nanonood. Miski kayong dalawa na nag-uusap online. So, minsan nagiging conscious sila sa itsura nila, sa sinasabi nila. Tapos sometimes, di ba, yung discussion natin, very fluid, pero pag inon yung recorder o nagsimula na kayo mag-record, let's say sa Zoom, nag-iiba yung, yung demeanor ng kausap nyo. So those are certain challenges that you have to be aware of. Now, why are certain interviews difficult? Una-una, pag interview, ayaw makapag-usap. Difficult yun, di ba? Yung hahabulin nyo. And you have to spend a reasonable time, especially if you're doing investigative reports, to actually get these people to talk with you. Yung ibang mga more veteran journalists ang ginagawa, may ibang style yung ginagawa, may style sila na ginagawa dyan eh. Pag talagang ayaw magpa-interview despite all earnest efforts for them to be put on record, at least to respond, let's say to accusations, ilabas mo yung article and that would smoke them out. Minsan yun, that's an effective strategy. Pero before you go to that point, make sure na talagang you made an effort to get them on record to respond, especially to allegations, para hindi kayo mapagbitnakan, no? And then, every effort should be recorded, especially today. Kasi ngayon, di ba, I think nabanggit sa introduction ni Carmela yung effort to bypass the media. Ginagawa rin yan ibang mga sources eh. Kunwari lalo pag politiko na mautak, ginagawa nila, hinahabol nyo siya because you're doing a special report. Alam nila na merong may shelf life yung investigative report nyo. Pwedeng gawin nila, hinahabol nyo ako at I think mapapasama ako rin sa investigative report na ito. Ang gagawin ko, magpo-post na ako sa sarili kong Facebook page o kaya sa aking sariling website, sasagutin ko na yung tanong. So mangyari, hindi pa lumalabas yung story, siya na yung nag-dictate ng narrative. So that's some of the risks. Nangyari yan before. I think I was covering in the Senate before, no? Several years ago. I had a story na ako yung bumubuo and then dinidribble ako ng isang senador. Tapos, anong nangyari? Alam ko nilabas niya yung nilabas niya yung sagot niya bago pa lumabas yung story. E di buiset, diba? Nakakainis yung mga ganon. So, you have to be familiar with techniques like that they can deploy against you. So, number 2 naman, pag yung interview is unresponsive or circuitous, yung paikot-ikot, no? So, pag sinabing unresponsive, pwede kasing meron silang binabanggit na salita in response to your question but they're not exactly answering your question. Ayan. Tapos pag paikot-ikot yung sagot nila, alam niyo namang walang pinatutunguhan, you have to stay on track. Dapat kasi, ginagawa ng iba, di ba, naglilista ng actual questions. Ako kasi, depende on what would work for you. You have to know which particular technique would work for you. Ako kasi hindi ko sinusulat yung mismong questions. Ang ginagawa ko, naglalagay ako ng bullet points. Tapos, lagi may ballpen pag nag-i-interview. Tsaka kahit anong papel, miski tissue paper yan, miski palad nyo. Basta kailangan may masulatan kayo. Kasi sometimes in the middle of the interview, meron kayong maiisip na anggulo eh. O kaya may makikita kayong opening. Sometimes, madadagdagan yung opening na yun eh. 'Di ba? Makakalimutan nyo lahat yun. Baka maalala nyo ilan yan. Isulat nyo lang agad. Tapos para hindi nyo makakalimutan, ako ginagawa ko, nilalagay ako ng sobrang diin na asterisk. Ibig sabihin, I need to ask this question as a follow-up. Tapos, kunwari, pag live interview naman, alam nyo, bini-BS na kayo, don't be afraid to cut off the interviewee. Kasi pag pinahaba nyo pa yon, kung saan sana makakarating yon, and they might end up dictating the narrative. Yun naman, yung konteksto na yon sa live interview. Bakit din interviews can be difficult? If they're hiding something, that can be very difficult. Pwede kasing humarap sila sa inyo for a discussion, pero ayaw naman na sagutin, just to show na they're not hiding. Magpapa-interview sila, pero hindi naman sila sasagot. Now, another difficulty is when the interviewee becomes unruly or confrontational. Mas mahirap to, let's say, kunwari, live audience, binarabara ka, no? Siyempre, tatamaan yung ego mo, iinsultuhin ka, how would you respond? Diba? Will you not stoop down to the level of the interviewee? You're not supposed to stoop down on the level of the interviewee. Huwag niyong gagawing model okay, hindi ko babanggitin yung pangalan, pero yung parang gangster, kung mag-interview, wag ganon. Okay? Of course, interviews can also be difficult if the interviewee wants to control the narrative. Yung para bang gusto niya, siya yung magde-dictate ng takbo ng interview. So pag ganun kasi, edi siya na rin sumulat ng story. Kasi siya na pala nag-dictate ng narrative eh. Mangyari, makaka-straight yung reporter. Mawawalan siya ng silbi. And hindi niya mabubuo yung story yung binubuo niya. Kasi siya na yung nag-dictate ng narrative eh. Tapos kanina pinapakinggan ko yung discussion niyo sa investigative report, no? Diba? Importante hypothesis eh. And it has to be a reasonable hypothesis. Hindi naisip mo lang, mukhang ganito to, no? Ipupurso mo to the ends of the world kahit yung mga detalye na kuha mo contrary to your initial hypothesis. So tama yung sabi ni Ed na dapat meron ka. You have to be humble enough to change track, to acknowledge na baka mali itong pinupurso ko, baka ito yung tama. Pero you also have to be aware that in the course of your interview, when you deal with certain officials, community leaders, for example, they might also try to convince you to get off track. Kasi ayaw nilang tumbukin yung angulo na alam nyo at alam nilang tama. Sasabihin nila, ito, yung common na sasabihin sa inyo na kausap, ito, based on experience, kung na ipurso yan, wala naman talagang storya dyan eh. Talagang galit lang sa akin yan, di ba? Pinakapi kayo, ganda ng usapan nyo, so na-disarm na kayo. Ikaw naman, magkakaroon ka ng konting self-doubt. O nga no, parang ang bait-bait nitong si sir eh. Parang hindi naman niya magagawa yung sinasabi sa kanya na ginagawa niya, di ba? So, ingat kayo sa mga ganon. Yan, yung interviewee is trying to manipulate the reporter. Yan, trying to disarm us. Ayan. Interviews can also be difficult if the interviewee simply does not know what he's talking about. Yung mga ganyan. So especially mas mahirap to pag sa Kasi pag interviewing behind the scenes, di ba, pag napansin nyo, parang nonsense yung sinasabi nito. O sige sir, bye na, thank you. Okay na yun eh. Ang problema pag live interview, nonsense yung kausap nyo. Paano nyo papahabain nyo? Let's say binigyan ka ng 15 minutes to conduct the interview. Di katakot-takot na monologue yung gagawin nyo dyan. Papahabain nyo yung tanong whatsoever, di ba? I remember si Arnold Clavio ba yun? Na yan, di ba? Nag-viral yan before eh. Kasi umaga yata yung sinalang sa kanya interview, hindi yata tama. Sa akin naman, ba't hindi niya kasi in-screen? Siya yung mag-i-interview eh. Ikaw yung news anchor eh. You cannot leave it to your assistants. Kasi ikaw yung haharap dun, ikaw magtatanong eh. So dapat alam mo. Sorry hindi ko po niyayari sa Arnold Clavio. Nagsasabi lang po ako ng totoo kasi prangka po ako. Tapos, number 3, interviews can also be difficult if the interviewer is not prepared. Diba? Pag ikaw mismo hindi ka prepared. Lagi ko sinasabi kasi, ang interview, especially kunwari yung live na mga ganyan, tatakbo yan eh. Sabihin mo lang, hello, hi sir, thank you for joining us. Dire-diretso na yung magsasalita na yan. And that would actually benefit them because you're actually rolling out the red carpet for them. Pero let's say you're doing the interview for, let's say, investigative report. Dapat nakaprepare yung detalye ng mga itatanong nyo. Tapos, para, ngayon, sa mga estudyante namin sa UST, no? They're doing a capstone project now. Ito yung usually investigative yung ginagawa nila for a capstone project. Ang usually tinatanong ko, are you conducting the interview na alam nyo na yung meron kayong initial angles in mind o yung pupunta kayo ron for a fishing expedition? Parang you're doing an article, a feature article about a person. Dapat meron ka initial angle. Ano ba yung gusto mong piece of that person's life, let's say political life, that you want to highlight? Hindi yung darating ka ron, sir, kumusta na ba? Kailan ba kayo pinanganak? So nangyari, biodata yung storified biodata yung lalabas, not a feature article. So preparation is always key. Ayan, ito yun. Ito yung segue. Ito, alam ko, lagi niya nadidinig to sa mga journalism practitioners and this is not a joke. Pag sinabihan kayo na piece of advice, prepare, and prepare. Totoo yan, miski yung mga topics na alam niyo na. Don't rely on simply your stock knowledge kasi kailangan yung freshness of your attachment to that knowledge. That's important. Ayan. Try to know and understand as much about the topic as you can. So, wala naman tayong excuse ngayon para hindi natin malaman, no? Kasi nga, noong unang panahon, inabutan ko yung days na wala pang Google eh. Yan, di ba? Carmela, inabutan natin yan yung wala pang Google. And I suppose based on my conversations, yung mga naging role models ko noon, sinasabi nila nung unang panahon, dahil walang Google, mas sharp yung utak natin, di ba? In terms of backgrounding. So, mas tinatandaan natin. Ngayon kasi syempre, ayoko munang tandaan yan kasi mag-google ko naman yan later on eh. So, don't let that be or don't let that work to your disadvantage. Pero since nandiyan naman yung Google, ba't hindi nyo gamitin? So try to know as many information as possible about the subject matter. Tapos, look for inconsistencies by comparing statements with data, record, previous pronouncements. Kunwari, kausap nyo, not exactly for a TV interview. May sinasabing kausap nyo, pero sasabihin nyo, sir, ba't sa dokumento? Sabi nyo, hindi nyo pinirmahan, pero pirma nyo na to, no? So ano ba to, forged? And why would anyone forge your interview, forge your signature? Kaya pala, baka makalimutan ko, baka makatulong din sa inyo to. No? Sometimes kasi, ano ba yung pinanggagalingan ng mga topics for investigative reports? Ang laking bagay observation, no? Especially if you're doing investigative reports sa community. Nakikita nyo, no? Parang may mali dito. No? Yung, last time, ang ganda na sinabi ni Manny Mogotoy, no? Parang hindi nakokolekta yung basura namin dito. No? Parang parami ng parami. So yan, pag in-expose nyo, may direct na impact yan. Sometimes naman, yung mga investigative reports, finifeed. Diba yung sasabihin, may lalapit sa inyong source. Eto, ang laking story nito, ganyan-ganyan. Siyempre, there's a tendency for them to oversell the story. Ayan. Ako, I've rejected quite a few kasi ginagawa ko pag lumalapit, una kong tatanungin, bakit ako? Diba? And why are you trying to come out with the story? And usually, meron silang gustong siraan. Meron silang gustong yariin. I remember before may lumapit sa akin selling a story about fire trucks. Hindi ko tinuloy, kinulit-kulit ako. Sabi ko, kasi nagtanong-tanong ako bago, syempre sasangkalan mo yung pagmumukha mo for that story, di ba? I realized meron silang pina-project na isang public official. Dahil gusto nilang patanggal, gusto nilang ipasok yung tao nila. Now, syempre, sasabihin nyo, sir, paano kung legitimate naman yung story? Tapos, merong motive. Lagi naman talagang may motive eh. So, you have to weigh the news value and the public interest component of the story. And that should very much outweigh whatever individual motive those spreading the stories to you. And of course, number 2, you have to make sure na solid talaga yung story. Baka naman kasi, parang concocted evidence. Mangyayari yan eventually sa mga careers nyo, sa mga future journalists dito. Lalapitan kayo, makikipagkape sa inyo, lalapagan kayo ng folders upon folders or envelopes upon envelopes of documents. Ang tanong, ano ba yung story doon? Ayan. Kasi minsan, di ba, mag-interview kayo, preliminary interview. Sir, ano ba story dyan? Nakakaisang oras na kayo, wala pa rin yung angulo. No? Sasabihin lang sa'yo, grabe yung corruption dyan, grabe yung corruption. Pero bakit? Ano ba yung corruption? Ayan. Again, yung motive, sana maliwanag yung pagkakasabi ko, you have to weigh that against the overwhelming public interest of the story. Just like what I mentioned last time, no? Some of the best investigative reports actually began or moved forward with haste because of certain motives. Diba? Yung sa Watergate scandal. So, na-discover yun dahil they tried to bug the National Democratic Office or headquarters. Pero na-discover nila yung very important na source, si Deep Throat, no? Huwag nyo nang i-research kung bakit Deep Throat yung naging reference doon sa sa source ng Washington Post kasi bastos yun.
Pelikula rin yung pelikula.
Porn-related yung reference nun. So, yung si Deep Throat later on, he was revealed to be Mark Felt, yung deputy ng FBI. So, gigil din siya kasi hindi niya makuha-kuha yung director's position ng FBI. And he eventually allowed the reporter na source niya to say it later on after he died. Ayan, tapos look for openings and seize them. Ito common din to sa especially sa mga live interviews, no? Pero you can also do this if you're doing the interview behind the scenes. Yung openings, makikita niya para magpa-pop siya sa utak niya na, teka, ito yung para opening to. You have to seize them. Or sometimes, you can also do some strategizing, no? So, wag niyo munang kagatin kumbaga yung opening na yon. Let it pass for a while tsaka nyo itanong later on. And then of course, don't be afraid to ask real questions. Yung ginagamit ko rito ng term, it doesn't have to be tough. So, kasi pag sinabing tough, masyadong baka minsan presumptuous, no? So, just don't be afraid to ask the real questions. Yung mga elephants in the room. Nandiyan naman lagi elephants, diba? Kaya nga may kasabihan na elephants in the room Too big not to notice, too big to ignore. So, don't be afraid to ask those questions. Tapos to, careful with interviewees trying to intimidate or disarm you. Dalawa yan eh. Tatakutin kayo, depende. Certain gestures that they can do to intimidate you. Iba naman, trying to disarm you. Yung pupurihin kayo profusely. Galing-galing mo. Talagang ikaw yung binabasa ko. Ikaw yung pinaka-reliable na reporter dyan. So, sometimes or most of the time, that's meant to disarm you para hindi ka na magtatanong. Kasi sinabi, di ba tayo, lalo Pilipino, masyado mabait, no? Pinuri ka na tapos tatanungin mo pa ng mabibigit na tanong. So, try to also learn body language. You don't have to be an expert on this, pero at least body language can tell a lot about how something is being said. And especially for print, no? Ang challenge kasi sa print dito, you have to appeal to all five senses eh. That's why writing is much better, much more difficult, but it's much more rewarding compared to, let's say, doing an interview on television. Kasi kahit mag-viral interview mo, 'di ba? Nakipagsabayan ka sa interview ni Boy Abunda, no? The interviewer, no? The standard for many people. Hindi pa rin siya eh. Iba pa rin yung tawag dito. Yung satisfaction pag alam mo nakapagsulat ka and then you made use of words, sentences, punctuations, phrases, angles, and then may human face yung article. Iba yung satisfaction nun eh. Now, yung interviews, dapat lumabas yung body language doon sa sinulat nyo. For example, sinabi niya, kunwari si Gloria, di ba? Sabi niya, I am sorry. I am sorry, simply sorry. Pero, paano ba niya sinabi yon? Ano ba yung pagmumukha niya, di ba? Masyado bang maasim, pilit, parang natatae, constipated? So, yung ganung body language should come out in the story. How it was said. Because sometimes how it was said is much more important or much more revealing than what was actually said. And then, be fair. Ayan. Although marami sa atin magagalit, especially if we ask real questions. But as long as we are fair, we can sleep soundly at night. And of course, don't do it for a show. Kaya nga sinasabi ko kanina, look for good role models. Hindi yung porke napapanood nyo, okay na, no? Then don't let the interviewer control the interview, as I mentioned earlier. And then ito, importante ito, don't convolute the questions. Kasi minsan, may mga tendency tayo na parang dami nating alam, di ba? Masyado matalino. So, ang haba ng tanong, basically, ang sinasabi ko rito, yung over-premise question. Ayan. So, for example, gusto mong tumbukin, tapos ang dami mong sinabi beforehand, those premises could actually provide an opening or an escape route for your interviewee not to answer the question. Or sometimes naman, you stack 3 questions in one. Chances are, hindi naman niya sasagutin lahat yan eh. Sasagutin lang niya yung dulo. No? Ang reference ko lagi dyan, subukan yung mag-text kayo or mag-chat kayo sa friend nyo, girlfriend nyo, boyfriend nyo, kaaway nyo. Maglagay kayo ng 4 questions. Pipiliin lang niya yung gusto niya sagutin doon. Ayan. Kunwari, you want to confront your boyfriend. Bakit hindi ka umuwi? Bakit ngayon ka lang? Bakit nakita kita ganyan-ganyan? Ang sasagutin lang niya doon isa. Ganun din sa actual interview. Don't convolute the questions. So, yung lesson sa journalism, sa news writing, the basic, one thought, one sentence, that helps in terms of questions. Ako mismo, I'm also trying to be consistent with this. Kasi sometimes, pag nag-uusap na kayo, madaldal ka na, di ba? Tapos kung ano-ano na pumapasok sa utak mo, so lumalabas na rin, di ba? So, it's also a challenge for me. Tapos, record the interview. Ayan. Huwag kayo masyado mag-rely doon especially pag public official yung kausap nyo, yung sasabihin sa inyo, di, huwag na i-record, usap na lang tayo, okay yan. Tandaan nyo yung demeanor niya habang nag-uusap kayo, pwedeng maiba yan pag lumabas na yung story. Okay? Bibigay ko sa inyo yung very concrete example. 2012 Corona impeachment, I conducted an interview with the head of the defense panel, the late Justice Serafin Cuevas. Siya po yung head ng defense panel. So I did a very long interview with him kasi gusto ko siyang gawa ng profile. So I went to his office. I think it was a Friday. And then yung story ginawa ko Sunday for Monday. Ayan. So ang goal ko lang doon basically profile and then syempre magchani-chani ng mga story based doon sa defense position because they were defending then Chief Justice Renato Corona against an impeachment complaint. Ang presidente noong panahon na yon si Noynoy Aquino. So isa sa mga anggulo, sinabi niya kasi, may iglesia factor. Pinagre-resign siya ng iglesia ni Cristo doon sa ano. Siya nag-volunteer information, hindi ko tinatanong. Hindi ko tinatanong talaga. So, it was a long interview, more than an hour. Umabot ng 2 hours. Binigyan ako ng extra Diyos. Alam niyo, extra Diyos, kung naalala niyo. That was a weird interview kasi first time ko ma-offer, di ba usually too big? Sabihin, no? Alak, di ba? May mga ganyan interview. So, alak muna. Yung extra Diyos, sabi ko, bakit ako binibigyan extra Diyos nito? Kulang ba ako sa energy? So, importante yun kasi nakuha yun sa picture eh. Fortunately, sabi ko, sir, pwede ba tayo mag-picture lang? Parang ano lang, yung evidence. Ayan. So, nandun yung recorder ko, tapos nandun yung extra Diyos. Nakuha yun sa camera. Ano to, I was still with the Inquirer nung time na to. Kumbaga, yung interview was done behind the scenes. So, walang ibang taong nandun. Pero recorded siya. Isa sa mga sinabi niya, I did not even know about it. Sabi lang niya, medyo nahihirapan niya ako ngayon kasi pine-pressure. Medyo chinecheck na yung mga books namin, yung taxes namin, pine-pressure sila. E di syempre pag reporter ka, oh my God, yun yung story. So, ano ka na? Ganun ang diba, journalist, yung temperament, yung talagang, yung may lulukso sa loob mo eh. Mararamdaman nyo yun eh. So, pinurso ko yung part na yun. Tapos, may mga pinag-usapan kasi kami na off the record tsaka on record. So, sinasabi ko, sir, ito on record. Ito pala, pa nag-interview kayo at sinabi ng kausap nyo off the record at recorded, sabihin nyo kung on record na. Kasi minsan, kunwari, 1 hour interview. After the first 10 minutes, sinabi off the record muna tayo. Nakalimutan niya sabihin on record na. So, hindi nyo na-resume yung recorder. So, mangyari, nasayang yung buong oras nyo. Yun sa kanya, I was very conscious eh. Sabi ko, sir, ito ba on record? Ito off the record. Tapos nire-read back ko pa sa kanya yung pinag-uusapan namin. Ang angulo doon, pinagre-resign siya, pine-pressure siya na Iglesia ni Cristo. Dahil Iglesia ni Cristo siya. So, lumabas siya, Monday, banner story. Gusto ko lang kwento, pasensya na, baka sobrang haba na, no? Kasi para akong binuhusan ng malamig na tubig doon eh. Nagising ako Lunes, I was on my way to the Senate to cover the hearing. Tapos, nadinig ko sa radyo, dinidina yung story ko, DZBB. Sabi ko, teka, syempre una kinabahan muna ako. Mali ba yung story ko? Hindi, tama yun, recorded yun eh. Dinideny niya. Ang denial ni nung the late Justice Serafin Cuevas, he never talked to me. Never daw kami nagkausap. Sabi ko, patay na. So ginawa ko, tinawagan ko yung isang defense lawyer. Sabi ko, sir, what happened? Bakit nagdi-deny bigla si Justice? Yung kinawento, pine-pressure daw kasi, ganyan-ganyan, Iglesia ni Cristo. Tapos sabi ko, ano bang gagawin niya? Talaga nagde-deny, hindi namin napigilan eh. Nagpa-press con pa later, nagpa-interview, deny. Sabi ko, sir, baka magkahiyaan dito. Kasi, eventually, ilalabas ko yung buong interview kung gusto niya. Noong time na hindi pa uso hindi pa ganun kadali mag-upload. Kasi 2012 pa yun eh. So, hindi katulad ngayon, di ba? Konting interview, naka-upload na yan. So, dati hindi pa ganun kadali. So, ang decision na Inquirer, sige, ilabas natin yung interview. Sabi ko lang ganito. Ito honest, I'll be honest with you kasi mga future journalist kayo. Kaya ako nag-atubili ilabas yung buong interview kasi interview na hindi for print eh. Diba? Ano nga yung usapan natin ngayon, di ba? Kung hindi sinet ni Ed Lingaw yung tone na kwentuhan to, syempre mas formal ako. Hi guys, thank you, ganyan. Yung usapan namin may mga parts sa parang kanto yung usapan eh. Kasi that's part of the technique. Pag nakikipag-usap kayo, di ba? Paglagay yung loob ng kausap nyo. So, ayoko namang lumabas yun sa public. So, sabi ko, pwede bang i-cut lang natin tong part na to. Doon lang tayo sa buong interview na So, noong time na hindi pa ganun kadaling mag-cut. So, it took a while. We uploaded that in the evening. And then, the issue rest afterward. Natapos siya. Hindi na siya lumaki. Ang point ko lang, kaya ako sinasabi yun, it's important for you to record the interview. Mm-hmm. It's for your own protection. Yung ibang, siguro yung mga old school na mag-isip. Kasi dati nung bata ako reporter, may mga na-encounter ako ng mga lumang tao sa industriya. Sabihin sa akin, huwag ka nang mag-record. Kasi use your memory. Tapos, nagko-cover kami ng courts, local courts. Sabi ko, galing nitong reporter na to. Talagang lang, yung parang sa movie na papanood nyo, jot down lang, tapos may story na. Sabi ko, one time na-realize ko, but yung quote niya hindi accurate. Kasi yung sa akin recorded eh. Yung sa kanya, hindi. Ang ginagawa pala niya, impressions lang. Kumbaga yung parang context clues yung ginagawa niya. Mahirap yun kasi paano pag nagreklamo. So record your interview, for your own protection, and of course, for accuracy's purpose. And then what if you actually agree with what the interview is saying? This is more difficult than dealing with an interviewee who is actually saying a lot of BS. Diba kunwari, lalo ngayon, di ba masyadong inflamed, masyadong divided ng bansa natin. No? Pag nag-interview ka, kunwari, about human rights, sino ba naman na magdi-dispute ng human rights, di ba? Sasabihin nila, ang kausap mo human rights advocate. Anong gagawin mo? Aawayin mo siya. Bakit ba kayo nag-espouse ng human rights? Di ba? Ang pag-uusapan nyo na pwede mo siyang i-confront, for example, tama ba yung data nyo? Baka naman in-exaggerate nyo. At most, pwedeng ganon. Pero kasi sasabihin ng mga loyalista, sasabihin ng mga trolls, so bakit pagkausap mo si Lenny Robredo, bakit hindi kayo as quote-unquote confrontational as when you speak, let's say, with people aligned with Marcos or Duterte? Ang sagot ko naman lagi ron, sino ba anak ng dating diktador? Sino ba yung merong hindi pa binabayaran na estate tax? Sino ba yung, kunwari, in the case of Duterte, may human rights violations record? Sabi ko, kung si Robredo lahat yan, talagang i-confront namin siya. Pag hindi namin ginawa yun, edi we won't be any different from the tuta journalists that you're dealing with now. No? Maraming tuta journalists ngayon, nagkalat sila. So yun. Babanggitin ko siya mamaya. Ito yun. You have to guard against false balance. Ayan. Ito kasi masyadong common argument to ng mga galit sa mga journalists. No? Kunwari, bakit ito in-interview mo, ito hindi. Ito ginamit to sa akin ni then Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano when he confronted me on national TV during the very first press conference they conducted after the very first hearing they conducted in the House on the franchise application of ABS-CBN. I think that was in May 2020 or February or March. Kinonfront niya ako, sabi niya, parang naalala niya noong 2019, nung tumakbo siya for Congress, nagagalit siya bakit daw mas maraming airtime ako ibinigay doon sa nagke-question noong legality ng pagtakbo niya at saka ng asawa niya ng sabay sa Taguig. Kasi sa Taguig dati, dalawa yung distrito niyan, di ba? Yung isang distrito, ang congressman, si Alan Cayetano, isang distrito yung asawa niya. Tapos yung mayor si Lino Cayetano. Tapos yung ate nila, si Pia, senador. Di ba usapang prangka, sabi ni Ed Lingaw, usapang kwentuhan lang, di ba? Di ba medyo makapal yun? Di ba? So, may nag-petition. Kine-question yung yung legality nung, pwede ba tumakbo yung dalawang asawa, yung sabay, tapos magkaiba ng residence? So, in-interview ko yung lawyer.
Magkaibang distrito.
So, tinanong ko, na-guess ko naman before yung si George Garcia, yung COMELEC chairman ngayon, yung lawyer niya. Ayan, sabi niya, well, it's allowed by law and eventually that would be allowed. Eventually, they were allowed to do that. Pero, si Alan Cayetano use that against me later on. Sinasabi niya, yan, hindi niya ginamit yung term na false balance eh. Pero sinasabi niya, bakit mas maraming airtime yung nag-aakusa kaysa sa amin? I was not given the opportunity to respond. Ang point ko naman dito, it's not about the length of the response kasi binigyan namin sila isang entire episode for them to respond eh. Pero kung let's say nakadalawang interview yung isa, hindi ibig sabihin hindi balance. Kasi unang-una, sino ba yung merong hindi mabangong ginawa? Hindi ko sinasabi mabantot Pero ordinary pag tinanong nyo, parang may mali, no? Mag-asawa, senador, congresswoman, tsaka congressman. So ingat kayo sa false balance. Kasi ang extreme end nito, di ba? Example na iba. Di dapat yung Biblia hindi dapat sinulat or pinublish as is. Kasi walang side ni Satanas eh. Di ba? O kaya, di ba demonize doon si excuse me for the pun, di ba? Di ba demonize sa Bible si Lucifer? Paano kung meron pala siyang meron pala siyang side na hindi natin alam? Di ba?
Bias.
Bias yung Bible, di ba? Bias for good, bias for God. Ayan. Parang, di ba, kunwari, stories Abu Sayyaf. Hindi ba natin pwede i-report na meron silang dinukot sa Sulu, for example, until makausap natin yung mga terorista? Ayan. So in the end, ask yourself, was your goal achieved in the end sa interview? Tapos outcomes, a well-conducted interview enlightens the public. And then you have to get a story out of that. And then, ang mga repercussions, if the sources didn't like your interview or your story, they might mark you and you might lose them. Pero in the end, let your body of work, your credibility, and your fairness do the talking for you. You will get more sources. Yung mga mawawalang sources sa inyo, yan yung mga hindi nakakaintindi ng role ng democracy, ng free press sa isang demokrasya. Ayan. Thank you.
Okay. Ang saya talaga pag ganyan ang usapan. Bok, dapat sa'yo isang buong episode eh. Isang buong umaga eh.
Bala ko kasi formal eh. Kaso sabi mo, kwentuhan eh. Yan tuloy.
We usually, people get to talk more freely that way, diba? At saka mas engaging eh. Mas engaging mga tao pag ganun eh. But nga baka we can set a different venue or different schedule na yung mga ganitong bagay pag-usapan kasi nakakabitin ba?
Baka too much information na.
Maraming salamat, Christian Esguerra. So much to unpack but let's unpack it later when we go into the open forum. But in the meantime, si Howie Severino is able to join us. I think he's now with us online. Pero I think he'll only be with us briefly kasi I understand he's a bit sick. Is Howie here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Howie, good morning.
Salamat.
Thank you for joining us.
Salamat, Ed. Magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Salamat, Christian, sa gripping interview war stories mo. At Ed, sa pag-facilitate mo, wag po style. Nakakatuwa. Well, baka nabanggit nga kanina, I literally got out of my sick bed to listen and watch. Pasensya na, I wasn't able to prepare a formal presentation. I've had a fever for the last 3 days. Akala ko nga I had COVID and dengue. Ngayon, flu pala daw ang sakit ko. So anyway, enough of my small troubles. Congrats kay Carmela, Weng, Carol, Shali at sa ibang organizers ng linggong ito. Seeing the fellows and younger colleagues like Christian make me feel our profession is in good hands. Thank you, Christian, for highlighting the hazard of false balance. Laging pitfall yan ng marami tayong colleagues. And I'm happy to see generational peers like Ed Lingao and Manny Mugato still alive and kicking.
Uy, matanda ka sa amin.
Konti lang, isang paligo lang. What a week to mount this event, guys. Thank you for helping mark the 50th anniversary of martial law in this way. As we all know, the free press was one of the first victims of martial law, and its practitioners among those first arrested and kept in detention for months and sometimes years. So this event is also a tribute to those who came before us. For those not very familiar with the history of PCIJ, we were founded in 1989 in the wake of the EDSA People Power Revolution when Philippine democracy was young. A group of young print journalists, ngayon puro seniors na katulad ko, wanted to deepen reporting and do investigations as a way of strengthening democracy and using journalism to make the powerful accountable. So lahat ng presidency mula sa unang Aquino administration noong dekada 80 ay naimbestiga na ng PCIJ, which is the oldest journalism institution of its kind in Asia. Ang isang malaking pagbabago mula noon ay mas nirerespeto tayo, na mga nasa gobyerno noon. Alam nyo na, ngayon, kahit sinong may critical perspective ay dinidemonize na. Tinatanggalan tayo ng legitimacy. It's all part of a global trend against democracy. I recall even when we were publishing our most critical reports about the Cory Aquino administration, the FVR administration, pati yung love life, yung extra-legal love life ni FVR, inimbestiga namin. He never took it personally. against PCIJ. We were never cursed in public. We were never threatened with a shutdown. It didn't mean that people were happy, that he and his allies were happy with our work, but they respected what we did and understood our role in our democratic system. Of course, much has changed since then, and we have been since then trying to find ways of doing this kind of work and being able to survive, basically. Alam na natin naging consequence nito, itong environment na to. No? Much of this, of course, is due to new technology. Hindi na raw kailangan ng journalist dahil may social media na at lahat ngayon pwedeng tawaging journalist. Pero isang totoo, hindi na tayo gatekeepers ng public information. The analogy I use now is information shepherds. We can help guide or shepherd our audience to what is true and away from the dangers of falsehoods. We help explain and analyze that information and call out lies, like what my colleagues Ed and Christian have often done. I understand the frustrations of today, but just remember that what we're doing today is not just to make a public impact now, but for history's sake, for the lessons our investigations can offer for the future. Aside from the public interest and the nobler aspects of this work, I appreciated that our fellows also felt the thrill of the story chase. When you know you're onto something, finding and assembling the pieces of a puzzle. It takes a certain intense personality to do this kind of work. Much of this reward is internal. Yung psychic reward. Don't expect to be liked or popular. Yung main job satisfaction mo ay manggagaling sa thrill of the chase at sa pakiramdam na may na-achieve ka para sa publiko. Maraming salamat sa sipag at dedication ninyo. May this just be the start of long investigative careers. Mabuhay tayong lahat. Maraming salamat.
Okay, maraming salamat. That was Howie Severino, chairman ng Board of Editors ng PCIJ, among many other things. But thank you so much, Howie. Sabi nga na, Howie, hindi na tayo gatekeepers ng public information. I suppose we have evolved na, as Howie said, into information shepherds to guide the audience to the truth and away from falsehood. So something to keep in mind. And also sabi nga ni Howie, we're going through a lot of frustrating things. Maraming mas maingingin sa atin. Apparently mas ma-influensya sa atin. Everybody now is a publisher, which is not a bad thing. Everybody now is a writer, which is also not a bad thing. But also it amplifies why it is now more important, now more than ever, that we continue to do what we do and to do it better. So, yun. Thank you, Howie. So, with that, I suppose may oras pa tayo for forum. Ganun ba? Oh, yes. Ayan, forum na tayo. Okay, sige. Ang dami ko sanang tanong pero I'll park my questions na lang and read the questions that were posted by many of our participants. Kasi magulang naman ako pag ako mauna, di ba? Okay, let's start off with some of the questions here. Teka, hanapin ko sa lamin ko. Okay, here we go. Nakong dami. From Pauline Plaza to everybody, I have a question for Karlston Lapniten. As somebody who's also part of the indigenous community, how do you encourage the youth in the community who want to become future journalists to pursue it? Karlston.
Parang medyo mahirap po yun Siguro you start first with you start first with finding your true purpose kung bakit ka ba nagsusulat. Kasi much of the things that I write especially sa investigative side is all connected sa indigenous people's rights because I find a deep connection to these stories. Hindi ko alam kung nasagot yung tanong pero tama ba? The way I understand it is
how do you encourage the youth who want to become journalists?
First is ayun, you have to find a deeper meaning other than writing. Maghanap ka muna ng mas malalim pa na dahilan. Like for me, it's all about advocating people's rights, IP rights. That's why I write. Kasi if I just write the stories because there's a story to tell, hindi mo maikukwento yung talagang dapat mong ikwento. Kulang eh. You must have a certain relationship to that story. So ayun.
A connection.
You must have find a deeper connection. Yun muna. Pag nahanap mo yun, I think you can write good stories.
Okay. From CyberGem Biasbas, for Aileen. Okay, medyo mahirap yung tanong na to. It was mentioned na may 3 H's, one of which is hypothesis. If we try to prove or disprove this hypothesis, wouldn't we be subject to confirmation bias where we are unconsciously selecting data to either prove or disprove a hypothesis? Wouldn't it be better to tackle an issue as a blank slate? I think we can ask this to of everybody to react to this.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Actually, sa iba-ibang storya, may iba-iba namang approach. So, depende sa storya. Isang approach ito. So, meron kang hypothesis. Siyempre, sa mga medyo matagal na nagsusulat, aware ka kung meron kang bias or confirmation bias. So, titingnan mo to sa mga kinakausap mo, sa mga data na hinahanap mo. Tapos importante din palagay ko yung pakikipag-usap sa editor or editors. Kasi dyan makikita mo saan kaya ako nagkulang. Ano yung mga hindi ko nakikita. So pwede siguro may ibang approaches pa. Hindi naman isa lang yung approach like start with a hypothesis. Pero usually, ayun, for investigative reporting, this is one approach. You start with a hypothesis. And also, it's possible to go different ways. Ayun nga, yung pinuwento ko last week, I started with the story of loan sharks. Tapos along the way, na-realize ko parang ang nipis ng storya. So, more research, more usap, kwento. Tapos nakita ko, okay. So, mas may storya sa online loan sharks. Sana nasagot yung tanong.
Okay, now let's move it around for all the fellows and see what your insights are. For example, let's ask as well si Paul, si Mark at si Karlston. Guys, anong inyong tingin? I think it's an important question eh.
Sir, paulit nga. Hindi nakikinig yung estudyante.
Okay lang. Sige. It's a question coming from CyberGem Biasbas of UPLB. The question is about hypothesis. If we try to prove or disprove a hypothesis, wouldn't we be subject to confirmation bias, where we unconsciously select data to prove or disprove a hypothesis? Wouldn't it be better to tackle an issue as a blank slate? It goes back to the question or the concept of bias and objectivity. Which is a very touchy issue for a lot of people, especially now. Lahat na lang ngayon, natawag tayong bias.
ang ano ko kasi, ang tindig ko sa issue sa usapin ng pagiging bias. Ako, personal to bias ako eh. Bias ako. Talagang mas binibigyan ko ng diin yung aggrieved party. Kaya nga, nagtatanong ako para mabigyan mo, ma-amplify mo yung boses ng mga nasa ilalim ng yung balance ng power. When you are reporting, hindi ka naman nagsasabi na hindi blank slate, walang blank slate. Saka wala kang timbangan na hawak at pareho ng timbang yon. Definitely, bilang reporter at bilang part ng komunidad, meron kang bias. Kaya nga nagre-report ka tungkol sa social issues eh. nire-report mo, inimbestigahan mo yung social injustices, yung human rights abuses. Kung magiging purist tayo na wala tayong pinapanigan dun sa narrative, hindi reporting tawag dun. Di ba? So, yun yung bias para sa akin. Paano ko tinitimbang yun? Balik tayo sa Journalism 101. Kapag nagre-report ka, you put, inilalagay mo lahat ng stakeholders. Kahit pa meron kang tinitindigan na issue, di ba? Pero lahat, lahat ng angulo, lahat ng gustong magsalita, lahat ng dapat ilagay na panig, nilalagay mo doon. Di ba? Yun yung reporting. Yun yung wala kasing gas-gas na yung usapin ng objectivity. At nung magiging bias. Bias talaga ako talaga bias.
Actually, maraming misconceptions sa objectivity, but I'll go to that later siguro. Let's run through everybody else first. Si Paul at si Karlston, baka you wanna pitch in.
Sir, pitch ko lang. Siguro ulitin ko lang yung na-mention ni Sir Ed kanina. I think important sa akin kasi importante na meron kang direction So you must have a hypothesis. So dapat may direction ka. Pero in the course of investigating the story and writing the story, at meron kang na-uncover na against dun sa hypothesis mo, ulitin ko lang yung word ni Sir Ed, be humble enough na i-admit mo na ay mali yung hypothesis ko. So you have to correct it. So wag mo nang ipilit. So kung sinabi na prove naman dun sa investigation mo, yung data na nakuha mo na wala namang corruption, then wag mo nang ipilit. So be humble lang. Pero importante na meron kang hypothesis para meron kang direction dun sa tinatahak mo na story. Yun lang naman po.
Okay. We're tapos si Mark, no? Teka, sorry. I got lost. Sorry. Tapos si Mark, Karlston, you just finished. Si Paul.
Quick lang po. Since this is an investigative report, no, you have to get all sides of the story. And I think ito yung strength ng investigative report over alternative media, over vlogs, over TikTok videos. Kaya in the previews, I said na pag ganun-ganun ako office, then I go to the farmers to verify information. Nire-report ko, this is how the office represented you in their press release, and then magre-react sila na hindi ganyan. So it's always the expectation versus reality. And we have the responsibility to verify information from both sides po.
Okay. Si Christian and Howie and Carmela, you might want to pitch in. Feel free to pitch in if you want to talk about this. I'm putting emphasis on this question of bias and I'm sorry, I got lost. Itong question ng hypothesis whether there's confirmation bias. Kasi it's been an ongoing discussion for the last 6 years. It's been used against us. It's one of the more popular arguments against media na we are biased. So baka lang you guys would wanna pitch in.
Ay, nag-raise ng hand ako.
Ilang, go.
Go lang ba?
Ilang, go.
Formal na tayo ngayon. Formal na ng konti. Okay. Sabihin ko, nakalimutan ko tuloy. Hindi. Ang suggestion ko doon sa mga, especially young reporters, yung aspiring journalists, disabuse your minds regarding the idea of bias in the context of hypothesis. Kasi kailangan mo ng hypothesis para hindi ka magiging headless chicken while pursuing the special report. Kahit ano yan, kunwari news story, di ba? Ito. I'll cite a very concrete example. I was covering Malacanang before. Simple ambush interview. No? Closing days of the Arroyo administration. Nandun kami sa Heroes Hall yata. Yung bagong Justice Secretary, nagtakbuhan yung mga reporters. Nag-huddle sa kanya. Sabi ko, bakit? Anong story sa kanya? Talaga nagsunod yung mga TV, camera, ganyan-ganyan. Tapos I found myself in the middle. Kaharap ko yung kausap, yung natulak ka. Sabi ko, ano ba tatanong nyo rito? Ba't ba kayo nandito? Sabi, nandun yung mic, nakasaksak, and then sabi ng mga tao, yung awkward pause talaga. Siguro, sabi ko, anong tatanong nyo? Wala nagtatanong. Kasi, nagsusuran yung mga tao, akala na use wording kausap. So, yung mukha ng tao, gumaganon siya. What are you going to ask me? Sabi ko, bahala kayo sa buhay nyo, kayo dyan, di ba? So, eventually, for courtesy, nagtanong ng konti, perfunctory na questions. Ba't ko sinaside na example yan? Yung example ng headless chicken for in an ambush interview. Ganun din pag especially investigative report. Pupunta ka ba, kakausapin mo, maghanap ka ng dokumento, hindi mo alam yung hinahanap mo. Hindi mo alam kung anong gusto mong patunayan or i-disprove. So, I suppose instead of using the term blank slate, you use the term openness. Na naghahanap ka, pero you have to be open to contrary evidence. Kasi we talk about the pursuing investigative report in the context of what we can prove. Yan. And not what we assume we were able to prove. Yan. Ebidensya. Yan.
Yeah.
Howie raise his hand. Howie?
Yeah. Gusto ko lang i-reiterate yung sinabi ni Christian. No? I mean, kumbaga, usually we base a hypothesis on a smoking gun. May tinatawag na smoking gun. It's not coming out of nowhere. It's not coming out of a desire to target anyone. No? But usually, the pool of targets are those people in power. Diba? And it's part of our role. Diba? Is to make sure that they're not abusing their power. Kaya nakabantay tayo. We're not aiming our attention at just people we don't like, di ba? Or yung mga nakaaway natin sa school. Hindi ganun eh. So, ito rin, yung sinabi rin ni Christian about bias, no? And I think many of my colleagues will agree. This has been a charge against journalists since time immemorial na bias tayo, na bias without the ED, no?
Mga bias kayo, mga bias.
Yeah. Well, aminin natin, no? We got into this profession because we have biases, di ba? I mean, biases reflect certain values. I'm biased for democracy. I believe in democracy. I don't believe in fascism. I mean, that's why I'm in this job. That's why I'm in this profession. I believe in free speech. I believe in freedom of the press. I believe in human rights. I mean, those are biases. Diba? Biases reflect values, and every human being has values. So I think what people should expect from us, what our audiences should respect from us, what our subject should expect from us, is not the absence of bias, but basic fairness, which is also a bias. We are biased towards fairness. It's a value. So, let's disabuse ourselves of the notion na kailangan wala tayong bias, no? I mean, that's crazy. Although bias has also been demonized, no? Kaya, if I misquoted here and said, uy, sabi ni Howie Severino, pwede tayong maging bias, no? I mean, tayo, no? So I trust that we're not going to be twisting anything out of context here, no? But I'm just explaining, the larger context of this word bias na sobra na abuse and na misuse and demonize when every human being has biases, no? But I think the basic value that we need to project and to practice and to show is not a lack of bias, but just basic fairness, no matter what our biases are.
Briefly lang siguro, dadagdag ako.
Sorry. Sige, go.
Sige. Gusto ko lang erase yung sinabi ni Aileen kanina sa presentation niya, what drove her to pursue the story on online loan sharks. Yung galit Yung galit niya when she witnessed an injustice nung nagsisingilan dun sa sari-sari store and she felt it was so wrong. So that's the bias, na you have the bias for justice. You want to correct things that are wrong. And then, when you decide to pursue a story, dyan na bumapasok yung journalism discipline. The interviews, the documents. At the end of the day, it's not about your bias. Because pag yung bias mo is yung sa pagpili mo ng story ang ipupursue mo, depende sa judgment mo, what is an important story that we all need to pay attention to. And in Aileen's case, yung online loan sharks, and it's a very important story. Kasi nga, ang dami na niyang biktima, di ba? papasok yung journalism discipline. Yung bias mo, labas na yan. Dokumento, interview, interpretation. So, dapat ipa-follow mo na yung investigative discipline. Wala na, labas ka na dapat sa storya. It's not about you anymore. Yun. And Christian, you wanted to add something?
Huwag lang sana magalit yung mga tao, no? Di ba kayo nakakurious yung mga nagre-reklamo ng bias against legit journalists? They don't actually complain about the same issue when it comes to SMNI or Anthony Taberna. Bakit parang pili lang yung inaakusahan ng bias? Think about it. Because hindi naman yun talaga yung understanding nila sa bias. Bias to them is what is against what they prefer to believe in. Pag yung isang news organization, quote-unquote, confirms what they want to hear, what they want to see, that's their idea of journalism. So sa akin, let's not sweat over that accusation dahil walang patutunguhan yan eh. Because siguro, maganda lang ginagawa natin ngayon dito. Ganda na, didinig yung sinasabi nila Howie, nila Carmela, nila Ed, tsaka yung mga fellows natin. Pinapaliwanag ng mabuti kung anong bias. Siguro to help your journalists and the cause of democracy, explain nyo na lang sa mga tao, sa mga nanay nyo, mga kasalubong nyo sa grocery, yung role ng media, tsaka kung ano ibig sabihin ng bias. Yun lang.
Maraming nagko-komento sa akin na sa Facebook na wag kang bias o wag kang bias. Suportan mong gobyerno. Parang napag-isipan mo ba na maigi? Don't you see the irony there? May mga ganun eh. But quickly lang, let me share a link dun sa chat thread. One of the best explanations on this issue of bias and objectivity that I found is from the American Press Institute. Yan, I posted the link dun sa chat thread. Where basically, kung gusto mong maging completely objective and completely unbiased, huwag ka mag-reporter. Mag-stenographer ka na lang. Kasi that is the ultimate in objectivity and non-bias. All you do is write what you hear. All you write is what is said in court. That is the ultimate in objectivity. That is the ultimate in non-bias. But that is not what reporters do. That is why we have what we call editorial judgment. You use your value system as journalists to determine kung ano yung malaki at ano yung maliit, anong importante at anong hindi. That is, you might say, not necessarily objective because that shows your biases. Because that's what reporters do. You're not stenographers. You don't write everything that was said in a 3-hour press conference. Hindi ka naman PR eh. Hindi ka rin stenographer. Pamimilian mo yung mga angulo na nakita mo base doon sa mga values ng fairness, relevance, accuracy, and so on down the line. So if you read, and please do look at that link, the American Press Institute argues that bias is not necessarily a bad thing. What is important is that you manage your biases because bias can actually be a good thing because bias is something that spurs investigative journalism. That is why people investigate wrongdoing because they think that something wrong is going on. And that's where investigative journalism starts. Hindi yung parang let's all be happy and see the rainbow. That's not what our job is, diba? So yun. As well, sabi rin dun sa link na yan, it also says na we have to acknowledge our bias and we have to manage it. And there are things that we should be biased for. It also says so there. For example, sabi rin ni Howie kanina, there are principles that are universal that you have to fight for. You have to give voice to the voiceless. You have to speak for democracy, human rights, civil liberties. Those are universal things that you should be supporting. Freedom of the press. Mga ganung bagay. Those are givens actually. So as reporters, we'd like to think that those are important to everybody here. So yun, sorry, nag-spin off lang medyo mahaba, pero I think it's also important to talk about these things kasi there's so much misconceptions about the concept of bias eh. and it's been used and it will continue to be used against us as we go on. Yun. Other questions? Teka ha? Sorry. But I think we still have 10 minutes to go, so we can still go through some of the questions. Okay. From Robin Cheryl Ann Cheng from Trinity University. Good day. In the era of disinformation, there is a relentless chase of truth, sometimes at the expense of the exposure or coverage of other news stories. How do we deal, how do we deal with sensationalism in the media? That's the question. How do we deal with sensationalism in the media? Anybody want to answer that? Or at least respond to that?
Simulan ko
go ahead.
I think that's why we're encouraging journalists and student journalists to practice investigative journalism. We really need to do better. Isa ang practice ng investigative journalism na makakasagot sa mga pagdududa ng mga nagbabasa sa atin. So sana mas marami pa sa inyong ma-encourage. That's why we are partnering with community news organizations to do investigative journalism with us.
Okay. Let's try to make a distinction between sensationalism and telling good, compelling stories. Those are not the same things. Sensationalism is, blowing it out of proportion, taking it out of context, and making something look like what it really is not. Telling a good story in a compelling manner means finding a hook that makes a story, an important story, more relatable to ordinary people para babasahin nila at panonoodin nila, and so that it makes a difference in their lives. May kasabihan nga sa PCIJ, di ba? A good story, journalists make the important things interesting and the interesting things relevant. Why? Because there are many important things that are actually boring. Like it or not, access, the economy, peace talks, these are boring things. Peace talks are boring, bang, bang, bang is exciting. Di ba? You know that. Those are really very, very boring things. Our job is to make the boring but important things more interesting to people so that they will sit up, pay attention, watch you, and read you hanggang sa kaduluduluhan. If you fail in doing that, then sayang lang ginagawa mo. The second half is making the interesting relevant. What's interesting to most people, to a lot of people? Sex and violence. But do you just want to present sex and violence as is? Or do you want to look at trends? Do you want to look at patterns? Do you want to see why there is so much violence in this area, or why this kind of violence persists? And then make it relevant. Diba? Those are things that could deal with the issue of sensationalism. We can make stories that are compelling and not necessarily sensationalist. Sorry, mapahaba tuloy ako. Fellows, baka may gusto kong sabihin. Like si Aileen.
Aileen, you wanna say something? I think it's important din siguro sa discussion na to yung media literacy, no? Kasi hindi lang ito one-sided na problema ng mga reporters, di ba? Because it's what the people wanna read. If we look at our Facebook pages, no, na which we know is defined by algorithms. Naku, minsan puro, si Carol, kinukwento niya nung isang araw. Minsan sa Facebook page mo, puro na lang si Heart Evangelista ang nakikita mo the entire day. When it doesn't mean there are no bigger stories that day, pero it's also defined by the wants of the readers. So, minsan madaling ma-tickle, no, yung mga readers if they see something sensational. So parte rin ito ng media literacy na as media consumers, we also have responsibilities. Hindi ito kayang solusyonan lamang ng mga journalists. So as student journalists yourselves, dapat ehemplo din tayo na when we share information, ano ba yung message? When we share stories on our own Facebook pages, parang sinasabi nyo na ito ang importanteng story today. Kaya ito yung i-share ko sa Facebook ko. And that's what your friends will see. It defines what is important to you. Kasi hindi mo sinishare yung ibang istorya na dapat yun ang pinag-uusapan. So it's a responsibility for everyone both the journalists and media consumers. Kasi we define the space we live in. And in this case, Facebook is a significant space for all of us. So kailangan din nating pag-isipan yon. Kung ano yung sinishare natin, ano yung nilalike natin, ano yung kinokomentan natin.
Okay. Any of the fellows wanna jump in?
I think Paul, you wanna say something?
Yeah. Just to add po, most Filipinos kasi are visual learners. They'd rather watch spliced or 30-second TikTok videos than read lengthy articles or watch documentaries po. So mas naengganyo sila sa exaggerated language, mga nagmumurang vloggers. Yan ang pinapakinggan ng mga tao ngayon. For investigative journalists, we shall look for subjects whom the audience could relate to. Kung madaming interviewees natin are coming from the communities, many people would side with the truth. Ito yung I think nag-stood out sa fellowship program. We have people, we have subjects who we can relate to in our mundane lives.
There's a question here addressed to Christian Esguerra, pero let me broaden it rin and address it to everybody here. Anybody can pitch in. From Justin Loreto, in terms of vloggers getting Malacanang accreditation, how it threatens, I suppose, how does it threaten the credibility of journalism? Does it promote democracy?
Okay. Yung unang kong sagot, naive muna, no? Yung naive na answer, we should allow everyone to cover, vloggers or not. Kasi platform lang ang pinag-uusapan natin dito. That's my naive answer. Pero ano ba yung realistic and the hard truth? Sino ba kasi i-accredit? At bakit ba ino-open yung accreditation ng Malacanang reporters? Or yung pool? Kasi, ang papapasukin most likely, yung mga vloggers na pro-administration. In that case, magiging extension po siya ng sa mga local offices, ang tawag dyan, Public Information Office. Pero sa Malacanang, siya, para extension ng Office of the Press Secretary or ng mga Media Affairs and Relations Office. So kung gano'n ang intention, wag na lang tayo mag-accredit. Kasi for example, kunwari lang yung mga fellows dito, let's say you start your own vlog, despite your credibility, sa tingin nyo ba ma-accredit kayo lahat sa Malacanang? Especially pag tinignan nyo, let's say yung yung content nyo. Or let's say siguro nag-report kayo at one point about the Marcoses. Ako for example, I used to be part of the Malacanang press corps when I was with the Inquirer. Pero ngayon let's say nag-apply ako representing my online program. I doubt kung bibigyan ako ng accreditation. Lalo pag tinignan nila. But parang puro Marcos yung pinag-uusapan dito. Diba? So kung gagamitin lang yun as a way to expand the propaganda arm of the government at our expense using taxpayer money, wag na lang. So it's not exactly a freedom of expression or democracy issue. It's exactly the opposite. That's how they want to further destroy the democratic space that's already shrinking by allowing their minions, disguised or not so disguised as bloggers, to do more propaganda work for them.
Susugan ko lang yung sinabi ni Christian na kasi I'm also part of the Altermedia Network. Totoo yun Kung usapin lang ito ng democracy, bakit yung Bulatlat, yung Altermedia, yung Pinoy Weekly, hindi makapasok sa Malacanang o iba pang government offices? Di ba? Rappler na nga di ba? Na nasa mainstream. Nahihirapan. At ngayon, maraming ABS-CBN reporters, lalo na yung mga bago, ang napapahiya sa mga request nila. So it's not about democracy or ano man. Labanan ng numero. So kung ano yung mas maraming parot, kung marami kang parot sa bakuran mo, SOR theory. Pag mataas, communication theory pa rin Pag marami yung stimuli, mas greater yung response, di ba, ng audience. So pag marami nagkukwento ng pogi points for whoever man, mas pogi siya. Kesa dun sa mga tao na nagtatanong, bakit ganito, bakit ganyan?
Aileen, I think wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was raising my physical hand. Nakakatuwa yung question kasi yun yung isang question ko sa isa kong klase. So inisip ko, estudyante ko ba yun na ibinato yung question sa atin. So parang, do we allow the vloggers to cover Malacanang? So naisip ko, syempre, no, like what Christian said, is the start niya, it's a democratic country, anyone can report. Pero syempre, who are we kidding? This is propaganda, obviously. Maybe we can let them cover if they undergo the rigorous training and maybe education of journalists. Or kahit hindi pa education hindi mo naman kailangan ng master's sa journalism. Or maybe yung mga naunang journalist, di mo naman kailangan makatapos. Pero yung training lang and the discipline, no? Ayun. At saka siguro if they understand the code of ethics, ayun. Yung mga regulatory parts pa ng pagiging journalist. Siguro kung naiintindihan nila, ayun. Pero right now, it's quite obvious that it's self-serving. Ayun.
Okay. Anybody else? To be Paul or Karlston? If you only feel like, or Howie, anybody? Kung wala na, I'll move on.
Yeah, sorry. Just maybe a final word on this. No, I think we shouldn't make the mistake of faulting the platform in this kind of criticism. No, it has nothing to do with vlogging and everything to do with the personalities who are vloggers. I think that's basically the point of Christian and Aileen. You know, kasi parang binubugbog yung concept of vlogging in this case, but. There are journalists who happen to be good bloggers, no? And they have they're well intentioned. They try to pursue facts, but I think yung isang concept ng journalism, and this is maybe one way of defining who a journalist is these days, is meron bang editorial process before this person's information goes out. Hindi yung live vlogging na, a lot of these vloggers will go to yun nga, nakita natin nung kampanya, no? Yung mga vloggers, they will live stream a campaign. Yun na yun. That's their journalism, no? It's just holding up their phone and live streaming. Walang editorial process yun, no? It's basically just airing whatever is said without any kind of filtering, curation, editing, etc. No? So I think that's what we need to be conscious of. No? Ano ba yung, what's the process behind it? And who are the personalities doing this blogging? What's their track record? Ano yung orientation nila? Rather than, faulting vlogging as a whole.
Okay. I'm afraid we've gone over time by half an hour. Masyado masaya yung usapan . I'm sorry for all the other questions that were posted, pero wala, naubusan tayo ng oras . Mag-email kay Carmela ng mas maraming oras next time. So in the meantime, we'll have to conclude today's affair because we're already way over time. Maraming salamat to everybody who took part in this morning's, not just in this morning's affair, but as well in the last 4 legs of the PCIJ caravan. Laking bagay po ng ginawa ninyo. Hindi lang sa mga fellows, pero dun din sa mga participants, sa mga nagtanong o sa mga sumubok na magtanong at hindi nabasa, pasensya na po. Pero thank you very much for taking part in the last few weeks' activities. We'd like also to thank our partners, Cebu Normal University, Visayas State University, Xavier, Ateneo de Cagayan, San Jose Recoletos, Trinity, CEU, UP Los Banos, Biliran State University, Centro Luzon State University, and Silahis Publication, Mindanao State University. Thank you very much for all your participation. Thank you also to our four fellows for what you did and what you intend to do. Thank you so much to PCIJ. And Howie, Carmela, Weng, the whole staff. And thank you very much to Christian Esguerra. Maraming salamat at pinaunlakan mo kami. I suppose some learnings as we close and some takeaways from today this morning has been about what we are, a community of journalists, who we do it for our community, our people, our country, why we do what we do, which is to address the falsehoods the misinformation, the disinformation, the misconceptions, and why we do it the way we do. The discipline, the process, the values, everything that makes us different from the other people who like to pretend to be journalists. Ang sabi nga ni Paul Penaflor, sometimes you will ask yourself, bakit mo pa ginagawa yan? May magagawa pa ba yung storyang yan? What's the use? At this point in our history, marami tayong magagawa at marami tayong kailangan gawin. So, it won't change everything, but I suppose in the end, as journalists, we just have to aim for changing the world one story at a time. Maraming salamat for being here today, and we hope to see you again in the next, next time mag-invite si Carmela.
Organize ulit tayo. So, pantayan nyo po sa Facebook page ng PCIJ for more forums like.
Okay, I guess that's it. Goodbye. Sabi nga ni Eddie Lade Mabalos. Sabi yan.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Howie. Get well soon.
Okay, syukran.
Thank you, Christian. Aileen,
Bye-bye.
Mark,
Thank you din sa inyo.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ingat.